gentlemen.
Live from the van down by the river.
Starring Mike
Murray.
This
Is
SNL.
SNL.
SNL By The Numbers.
numbers.
That's right. Here we are in the month of June, still covering SNL. We had the 1000th episode of SNL. We had the 100th episode of SNL by the Numbers. And now we have the privilege of covering the very first series of SNL UK. For another edition of Legacy Watch, John Schneider back in the house. Good to see you 2 weeks in a row, or 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah, great to be with you again, Mike. So much fun. I know that we're going to head on to a long hiatus of not hearing from Mike Murray for a few months. So very sad to be ending the season with you, but it's been so much fun being with you all season long.
What a pleasure. I mean, who has more fun than us, truly?
Nobody.
And for the first time on By the Numbers, we had to get somebody, right? Staying up late with us. It's 7 p.m. here on the East Coast, but it's midnight where he is. It's Nathan Hobley-Smith. Welcome to the program.
Glad to be here. It's Tuesday, baby.
Yes, it is. Special edition Tuesday by the Numbers and Monday by the Numbers. So on both fronts. So if you watched us last Wednesday, we went through all 16 members of the American SNL, stat by stat, baseball card by baseball card. We're going to do the same thing. So Nathan, what should we call the baseball cards for the British version?
I guess the football cards, I guess that's what the equivalent is, or soccer for you Yanks over there.
Very well. So, yeah, I mean, the World Cup is coming here pretty soon, so we all got to brush up on our football.
Nathan and I may or may not have talked about this in the pre-show before you were here. Mike, I was like, what sport do we call the baseball card review?
Yeah, we have established it for the audience. So these will be the football cards for the Premier League of sketch comedy over there.
Absolutely.
So we're going to go by power ranking, and if that's something you're not familiar with after 101 episodes of By the Numbers, here's what it is. It is one stat that measures all screen time appearances to get impact on every episode of the show, from a host, from a cast member, from everybody involved. And we're going to go in descending order for the British cast. Shall we get going, Nathan?
Let's do it.
Yeah. John, are you ready?
I'm so ready. Never been more ready.
Yep. And we are brought to you, as always, by LateNighter.com. Here is the first cast member we're going to talk about, which is, I think, one of the best finds and, had the fewest appearances, but it's Ania Magliano, co-anchor of Weekend Update. And here are the stats. So 73.2 in power ranking. That puts her last in a cast of 11, 41 minutes, 40 seconds of screen time over 11 segments. That's good for a 1.38 SPE. That's sketches per episode. Never got to say the coveted live from London, but there's always next year. Screen time segment breakdown is very easy. 96.9%, of course, coming during update. We did see her in the premiere in the Paddington Experience, the Tina Fey episode, and we saw her a little bit in the Nicola Coughlan monologue and one live sketch. So that's the breakdown right there. The peak for Anya was in the Nicola Coughlan episode. 6 minutes, 57 seconds. Overall, average screen time, 5:12. Average screen time per appearance, 3 minutes, 47 seconds. Nathan, you're up first. What did you like about Ania Magliano's first series on SNL UK?
I thought it was hard for her because I thought Paddy Young had such a strong start on Weekend Update. And I think it took Ania a little bit of time to kind of catch up. But by the end of the series, not only were their chemistry fantastic, but she was on top form. It would be nice to see her appear in a few more live sketches and pre-tapes, but I think that she's going to have a great season 2. And even though she's at the bottom of this power ranking, that's only because she's Weekend Update. So fingers crossed they can find a good impression for her to do with some politician or something for next season.
We did see it happen with Colin Jost. So if there's a female British Pete Hegseth out there that Anya can play in the cold opens next series, then we'll look forward to that. But yeah, to your point about Paddy and Anya and the chemistry, I thought it was like apparent from the first episode, but it only got better. We saw Paddy have about a minute and 15 seconds more in the first episode, about 30 seconds more in the second episode. And then she had her moments too, where she was dominating at the desk and having the guest segments. So John, what about you covering Jost and Shay for as long as we have, and now just seeing this fresh pair, which I might have been one of the highlights for me?
Yeah, the pair has been fantastic, and she's a really, really solid weekend update anchor. I will say that, all of these power ranking numbers from the bottom of the list are much higher than the ones we see in the US, naturally, with there being only 11 cast members and the way that they're using all these people. So, you can't really look at anybody and say, oh, bad season. She is at the bottom of the list, and I'll say that is a big surprise for me. I think that when I came into this season, and I spoke to James Longman in the pre-season, I guess we call it pre-series, in the pre-series, he told me who the update anchors were first. And it was such a fun moment where we got to say, okay, it's Ania and Paddy. But I had no indication that they weren't really going to use them in sketches. And it was sort of unclear to me, and still is, why that was the case. I get wanting to have some sort of adjustment, and this is a hard job, and they want them to be focusing on updates. But with only 11 cast members, I don't really understand why they didn't use Anya more in sketches. We'll get to Paddy in a moment, but for me, this feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity, and that's not to take away anything from her update anchoring, which was good. It's just she seems so talented and so popular off the show that it's a little bit confounding to me.
I agree, and I think that they would benefit from having Paddy and Anya be in sketches while maintaining a cast of 11, or maybe it gets slightly larger next series. But that one sketch that she was in Amy Lou Wood's episode, Posh Gits, and she had very little to do in that sketch too. So it was kind of a weird choice, John, to bring her into a sketch just to kind of let's get everyone in the sketch. That's kind of what it felt like to me.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a throw in. And look, I'm sure she's been involved in some of the other writing and been around the, building during the rest of the week. But I can't really recall another anchor who's been in this situation except for Michael Che, where you're just sort of exclusively updates. I know you can argue people like Tina and Dennis Miller were placed in those roles, and then they didn't really do a lot. But Dennis in season 11, even into season 12, was in sketches. Tina was sort of a little bit where she would go on runs of not being in sketches, and then she would have some fun and write some sketches herself and then put herself in things. But Tina was the head writer. It just, for me, it's not really adding up as to why they decided to do this. I totally agree with you, Nathan. I do think that Paddy has a very unique look to him and a unique delivery. So he was naturally a standout from the first episode. And I'm not surprised why maybe they leaned towards him at the beginning. I do think she continued to get better and better as she went on, and really did remind me a lot of Jane Curtin as we got towards the end of series 1, as one of the original goats of this show who could just lock it down. And part of me does wonder of what it would look like if Anya was exclusively doing update even without Paddy in the future. So a lot of thoughts there.
For sure. I was just looking at the difference because you mentioned Michael Che, and I say all the time that he hasn't appeared outside update since the beginning of season 49, and now we just wrapped up season 51. So looking at his, overall, like for the appearance per episode, it was 402, and Anya's at 512. So, it's definitely apples to apples comparison in that regard, because there wasn't much outside update for Anya. But Nathan, what would you like to see maybe her do in a sketch, or could she do character work, impressions, that kind of stuff?
Maybe there's some people in the chat that might be able to help. I'm not too familiar with her maybe sketch or acting background. I know that she was very popular because she was on Taskmaster. So maybe we need more opportunities for her to be in these sort of sketches. Like I said, it's always an easy kind of connection when there may be a politician that they may look like, or somebody in the British public eye. But yeah, I'd love to see her be a bit wacky and be a quirky character. Did she appear in that Only Way is Essex sketch? Was she?
Yes,
Yes.
that was
There-
the
there-
posh
yeah.
gets one was her.
Yeah. So just more of that, really. I think it would be a great opportunity for her to showcase some skills outside of kind of stand up or weekend update.
I gotta give a shout out to like the burgundy blazer and the hair combo, because I feel like establishing a look. John mentioned Patty with the mustache and having some more physical bits behind the desk. So I do enjoy Anya's delivery, and I've checked out some of her stand up since this series has ended, and I've liked what I've seen there. So John, any final thoughts on our first
Yeah,
cast member here?
Sure. I think, this is what, if you're joining us for the first time for any SNL UK by the numbers, this is sort of when we could do a little bit of a brutal cast assessment of, what really is working and what isn't. And I think for Anya, I mean, I do wonder if, she looks a little bit like Annabelle. And I wonder if maybe that was part of the reason why they wanted to focus on, hey, Annabelle sort of has that like look and feel in sketches, and Anya is updated. Now, when you see Anya in sketches, you'll know it is only 8 episodes. Perhaps series 2, we come back and we see her more in sketches. But that's really the only thing I can complain about. I do think that, like I said, she started off okay. She got better and better as the series went on. And I did feel when you had that moment in the final episode of her, taking on the harness and flying out of the studio, it did feel meaningful. Even if it was just a small joke and a bit that wasn't supposed to mean anything, I saw so many fans of SNL UK freaking out about, is Anya leaving the show? Is she not going to come back? She has all these stand-up dates and show dates that are booked. So you do have to wonder about how much, regardless of her being in sketches or not, she's connecting with the audience. And I think it is overwhelmingly a success for the show. So I feel good about her moving forward, Mike. I just want to see even more.
And as far as Legacy Watch goes, to touch on that, just being the inaugural anchor or co-anchor of the series, I think is huge. Think about Chevy Chase, but we also think about Dan Aykroyd, Jane Curtin, going to like the continuing through the first golden era. And I think, Nathan, that the best thing that SNL UK could do is to lean into this pairing for season 2 and beyond.
Absolutely. I did wonder with her like flying off into the sky if there was that potential rumor that she might not be returning. But I've already seen that Paddy Young's rescheduled some of his stand-up dates. So maybe you might be able to tell me, has Anya made any update on hers so far?
It looks like I haven't seen any yet. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess we'll see what's going to happen there. I haven't been following their stand-up dates outside of the show as much since the show has ended a couple weeks back, but I gotta think that they will have her there. I just think that the platform to move your career forward is so much bigger than her doing any one or group of shows. So for me, unless there's some business reason that she's committed to going on this tour, you have to find your way back there to Anya to the show. Because I think that if they replace her with a different anchor, then we start making comparisons and it becomes tricky.
And also, I think I don't want to make assumptions on Anya's sexuality, but from what I've gathered from her stand-up and weekend update, she represents a platform to like the bisexual community, and I think that's really important for diversity on SNL UK.
100%.
Definitely, and happy Pride Month as well, because it is June now. So let's, as far as Legacy Watch goes, I would also say inversely for the show that it would be a huge mistake not to bring back Anya and Patty, if that's even a question. So let's keep it moving and look at our next cast member, which is going to be Paddy Young, Anya's co-anchor. So the stats for Patty in series 1, he's at 81.1, 10th in the power ranking, 42 minutes, 50 seconds total, over 15 segments. So 4 more than Anya. He had 1 live from London at the end of the season. That's a 1.88 sketch per episode. The breakdowns similar to Anya, of course, with a 91.6% in update, a little bit in pre-tapes, a little bit in sketches. We'll talk about those, and a 5.5% in that cold open we saw near the end of the year. Best episode was the final, because we saw him in that cold open in the Gatwa episode. And overall, 5 minutes, 21 seconds per episode and 251 per appearance. John, I'll go to you first on Paddy Young.
Yeah, great season for Paddy Young. I think he was maybe one of the most hyped cast members before the show started, and he certainly came in with a unique delivery that I think he owns. Just that, after a joke and just focusing on the camera and sort of moving his head to tell the joke. I could sort of compared it like it's a little bit of mix between Dennis Miller and Norm, but like Norm Macdonald, who I didn't mention earlier as somebody who started to appear on and off of sketches. I mean, Norm had one season where he wasn't an update anchor, where Kevin Nealon was doing the desk. So he had that experience in sketches. And then he moved to the desk, focused mostly on update until he got the role as Bob Dole. And when he did that throughout the election cycle, it was like, whoa, Norm, this huge character, is also in sketches. That's so exciting to see. So we would get him every now and then in something. And even if it's just a very small sample size, seeing Paddy play Andy Burnham in that series 1 finale was so exciting for me. It was a little bit of a climactic finale to watch that and not get too many like huge moments. I know there was a few great cameos, but this to me was a moment here where Nathan, I haven't followed UK politics in the last couple of weeks, so I don't know where Andy Burnham stands right now in the race for future PM. But if that is the case in the future, when we return for series 2, Paddy has a huge role on his hands, and that's sort of the Chevy Chase prophecy of playing the most important political figure in the country and doing Weekend Update, and then you become the star of this show. So I think a lot of excitement is definitely deserved for Paddy Young.
I'll have to tag in Nathan for that one to see how likely that is. If he could weigh in a little bit for us.
Yes, as Frankie the other week very well described, it's all kicking off. So Andy Burnham, a colleague, an MP in Makerfield, which is in the northwest of England, has dropped out of his seat, and a by-election to get Andy Burnham as an MP, because you can only run for Prime Minister if you're an MP. So the election build-up has begun. I believe it's sometime in the next few weeks that Andy Burnham will be challenging various other political parties to get that seat in Makerfield. And if he wins that by-election, he can then make a bid for Prime Minister. So it's very, very exciting. And Paddy Young trained at Manchester Met University on the acting course. So Paddy's from an acting background, which is very different from Ania. And I think it'll be really interesting to see Paddy potentially in more sketches, because he's got the training and he's got the goods.
Definitely thank you for that insight, because this is something that could change the entire legacy, John. I know we haven't got to that part of the conversation yet, and speaking of that, we haven't had a Trump impression yet, but we did briefly in the premiere hear Paddy Young on the phone doing a quick hello as Trump, and kind of got my hopes up a little bit, because in the Tina Fey and Jamie Dornan episode, we saw him for 15 seconds apiece in pre-tapes. That was the Underage face cream and then the time change incident with Jamie Dornan. So I thought early on in the series that, oh, this makes sense. Maybe when they film pre-tapes, then the anchors are more available. John, did you think that? Because maybe the sketch rehearsals would get in the way of the joke writing to be topical.
I definitely thought that. And especially with that time change one, because he, I believe, had a hand in writing that one with Al Nash and Al Roberts. So they were, here's an idea that comes to them, from an anchor, and then they put it into production, and he's very much a part of it. So to me, it felt like, at least for those first, quarter of the season, it's looking like, hey, Paddy's going to be a part of stuff. Maybe we're waiting. We saw Anya and Paddington. Maybe we're going to see them more and more. And it felt like in the middle of the season, they didn't really, capitalize on that. But then at the end of the season, we did get him in that cold open. Very curious what happens here. I'll also say, Mike, I love him on Weekend Update. I think he's, very, very exciting. I think that he's the most exciting Weekend Update anchor I think we've had maybe since Tina. It's been like I love Seth, I love Amy, Joseph and Shay are great. I think there's something about him that just has this unique look and delivery and voice. And I think that, if I was not knowing any of them before the season and I had to pick which one I would want to be at the desk, it probably would have been Paddy. So I was excited to see him there. And I do think that Anya makes him better. And I think he makes her better. So they're an amazing duo. But there is something just about his hair, about his mustache, about his delivery that really just captivates me.
And what I mentioned earlier about the physicality, it was the helium joke that just grabbed me super early on him with the lack of helium, I should say. And then eventually him screaming at the writers locked in the basement and the trap door. I love those when they work outside the box on Update, always works for me. And I agree, John, completely that I like having the mixed gender pair. I've been talking about that on SNL US for so long with the longest running pair, longest running ever, Colin Jost and Michael Che, that it kind of soften the edges of Paddy and also make Anya more edgy at the same time because her stand-up is edgy for sure. And just to finish that comparison, Weekend Update did get longer as the season went on. The US version was 12:55 an episode, so 12 minutes, almost 13. The UK version was 11:21, so about 13-14% less update in the British version. So Nathan, legacy watch for Paddy. Can you see him being somebody whose face is synonymous with SNL UK if it goes for 4 or 5 series?
Absolutely. I think if things happen this summer with Andy Burnham, he might be the new face of Saturday Night Live UK.
John, what about you? Same question.
I think he can. I think they're definitely holding him back right now, and as they are with Anya. Again, it was a strategic choice, clearly, to not have them be in sketches as much as possible. I think, there's a lot more mystery when it comes to what Anya can do in these sketches, just because we don't have the sample size to see it. I think with Paddy, we have a little bit more of an idea that he could really stretch, that he can have this sort of dynamic energy that we can see in sketches. So I think it's an added layer that I would hope to see more in series 2, regardless of whether Burnham is still in the political zeitgeist in the UK or not. But overall, you mentioned it. I love what he did on Update, not only with telling jokes, but even those bits which are reminiscent of the Tina Jimmy era Update that we saw in the early 2000s, of the writers in the floor, that type of thing. And it's not just the writers in the floor, but it's also the look after. And I think that even the episode after that was introduced, Paddy once tells a joke and then he looks down at the floorboards as a nod to the audience of saying, okay, well, if you're following us along week to week, you totally get what's going on here. And there's added incentive to just enjoying the full series as it goes. So he's a keeper to me. Legacy is as high as you can get for someone starting in their first season as an Update anchor.
Definitely. And I love that you mentioned any type of runner or meta or continuation, that type of thing, because he also had the K-pop monologues that he would do going through all the thing about BTS, and then him and Anya doing hand to hand. So I like to see them do more of that stuff. If you talk to a layperson SNL in the US, they're going to mention Joke Swap. So I would like Anya and Paddy to have something that they can go back to that's going to work, 2/3 of the time at least. Is that's a good hit rate for me. Shall we move on?
Let's keep going.
All right, so we're going to have our first cast member that's not behind the Update desk, and that's going to be Larry Dean. So we have a Scottish stand-up in the cast who took the longest to really break through. It wasn't until Amy Lou Wood's episode where he played the king on the plane in the Royal Flight cold open. He got 9 minutes 14 there, so we had to wait, till episode 6 for Larry Dean to break through. Here are his stats on the football card, Nathan. 83.3, good enough for the 9th in the power ranking, ahead of Anya and Paddy. 33 minutes, 29 seconds, so bottom in screen time. 4.63 sketches per episode, though, so we saw very short bursts of Larry. That was 53 seconds per appearance. In episodes, it was 4 minutes 11, though. The pie chart, we have 53.5% in live sketches, 16.3% in cold opens, where he did get to say live from London 3 times in his 37 segments. 3 of them, he was in those cold opens. 6.9% on update. So we saw some brief ones when he came in really quickly, and then we saw a longer one later in that season in the Amy Lou Wood episode. So for Larry Dean, I think I was rooting for him really early. I liked his look. I liked his vibe in the Internet HQ with Tina Fey. And then week to week, it was like Dornan, Riz Ahmed, Jack Whitehall. Like, when are we going to get a Larry piece? So Nathan, I'll go back to you as far as I don't know how tapped you are to the stand-up scene in the UK, but was he somebody that was known to you? And what have you liked so far in series 1?
He was known. He has a real cult fan base. I think he's fantastic. I think he's a superb impressionist. And I think it's such a shame that it took until the whole Amy Lou Wood episode for us to really, truly see his brilliant skills. How many times was that Daniel Day-Lewis cut after dress rehearsal?
It was a lot of times. I believe that one was cut from Riz Ahmed, Jack Whitehall, Nicola Coughlan, and Amy Lou Wood. So 4 episodes until we got it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. And it was such a great sketch. And, pre-tape. I thought it was such a shame that it wasn't earlier in there, because maybe then he would have had a little bit more momentum. But his last 3 episodes were wonderful, and I just can't wait to see more from him.
There was only 5 sketches this year, including his update appearance with the Amy Lou Wood episode, that he had 2 minutes or more. So, can't highlight that enough, that it was 53 seconds per appearance of those 37. Other ones are the Royal Flight cold open playing King Charles that I mentioned, also in Amy Lou Wood's episode. The looking through the mirror, which I loved, seeing the actual Louis Theroux come in after all the impressions. The Badgers football club kids of the football players in the tunnel with the kids fighting over which one they want to walk onto the pitch with. And then a big ensemble piece where everyone racked up screen time. Who will land the plane? So, John, did you have a favorite Larry performance that we didn't mention?
Not that we didn't mention. I mean, I guess I really like to stand up also in episode 6 on update. I do think that's one, we didn't get into too much. But, for me, Mike, I think that this is an interesting conversation. The last time I really did a By the Numbers show was between episodes 5 and 6 for SNL UK. And I was open and honest about how it's really hard to do these shows because it's such a small sample size. We're, looking at 2/5 of the season of what we get over here. And we're judging these people's season on such little data. But in order to do our jobs and properly recap, I have to be honest and talk about what I saw, which was that if there was any fire lit among the cast of like who was really working on the show and who wasn't, there was certainly a fire lit for Larry, where people were saying after a few weeks, we're not seeing him at all, and we don't know what's going on here. So he did that Beans Bros thing in episode 2. The London Marathon, he had a brief bit, and we kept talking about how you can't keep getting away with these small appearances if we don't get a large appearance. There's just no way for the audience to justify you coming in for a quick joke if we're not going to be able to get to know you as a performer. But then Amy Lou Wood's episode did come around. He did play the king. That was so important. It was a huge episode for him. And yes, episode 7 wasn't so great, but in the finale, he did the looking through, and Mr. Blobby, he was very involved in that one as well. And I do feel like he really showed out in the finale. So he may have been feeling the best coming out of the season, but the first 5 episodes, I don't know how good he was feeling about his time at SNL UK. So I'm excited for his prospects, Mike, but it's definitely a weird 8 episodes for him.
Definitely. And it feels like this is the first narrative underdog story of SNL UK. We see it every year. Sometimes there's 3 underdog narratives in the SNL US cast, whether it's Punky or Melissa or get somebody on screen more. So with a cast this small of 11, but it's truly more like 9 if you don't count Anya and Paddy, there was more room than ever for everyone. And we're seeing the numbers be so huge in comparison to SNL US with a smaller or shorter runtime. So I guess there's no excuse to not get stuff on the show, but I'm glad that it eventually happened. One category that I didn't mention because I want to save it for now is that he did lead the cast in pre-tape appearances. So we've talked about SNL not knowing how to really handle stand-ups in the cast in the past in the US version. So he had 14 pre-tape appearances. So maybe that's somewhere that he's comfortable, that he can, do pre-filmed stuff more. But that was also, I think, takes up way too much of his pie chart, John. 21.4% should not be in pre-tapes.
But it's a little bit of a catch-22 because maybe they feel, and I do wonder if this was, something we talked about a bit with Marcelo, which is that, is he so big of a personality? Is his accent really different? Like, I'm trying to think of things that you could sort of question as to why he stands out compared to the rest, so that when people are writing sketches, live sketches, they don't have a place for him as much because having Larry in the sketch takes away from the rest of the sketch. So then if he's not available, if he's available because he's not in live sketches, then of course, send him off to go film a pre-tape. I think that that's the natural, design of these things, is that the pre-tapes come together. Okay, we can write Larry into this pre-tape, but live sketches, I think it's a little bit tougher to do that. So I do wonder if there is something that's holding him back, because for me, if I'm coaching Larry and he's coming to the corner of the ring right now and he's saying, John, what do I do? I would say, for sure, we need you in more live sketches and we need your voice anchoring these things.
And get on Update for some stand-up as well. We saw Ayoade get on there twice. We saw Emma do her Woman Who Can't Be Ignored twice. So have something recurring there would work. But I'd love Nathan to jump in on your point about just the difference in dialect and culture that makes Larry stand out to someone like you who's in the UK versus us who doesn't pick up on those nuances quite enough.
I think it's important to have people from outside of England. I think it's quite a shock that we don't have a Welsh or Northern Irish performer on there. Maybe that might change with new cast. I think it's refreshing to hear his voice, particularly on that first episode with the internet people. I thought that was a really good introduction for him. He's such a good impressionist and great with accents that I don't think it makes that much of a difference to me from the UK. I think hearing Scottish accents is quite the norm. And I mean, I'm Northern, so the more regional accents, the better for me. I just wonder if you've got George Fouracres on one side, who's got that theatrical background, and then you've got like Jack Shep, who's got the Gen Z sort of audience there. Where does Larry fit in with all of them? And I wonder if it's more of a demographic thing. Where do we put him in these sketches?
Well, Nathan, the irony for me is that I think that he is more interesting to everyone outside of the UK because, number one, generally, people are more interested outside of the UK in British royals than British politics. So with him playing the king, I mean, that's a huge role for anybody outside of the UK. And then number two, I do think that his accent and his just general vibe and demeanor being so different than everybody else just makes him stand out among a cast that, sometimes you could say, all right, like this person kind of has the same vibe as this other person. Like we talked a little bit about, Patty and George could kind of have those same things. Sometimes Jack and George have those moments together. Hamed and Al, like I think that Larry is just so different on its face that I think it's interesting enough that we should be trying to find a path for him.
I agree.
I want to put you on the spot one more time, Nathan, with a question that I can't answer, and I don't think John can answer as well. Is there's such a put your finger on it difference, I feel, like of the British comedies I've watched, like I was a huge fan of Peep Show and others, is for the UK listeners and watchers, is there a difference in the comedy stylings that's so stark with Scottish versus English?
Yes, I guess so. I'm not too familiar with some of the big sitcoms because they do have their own kind of television networks up north, and I guess some could say it can be quite broader or sometimes drier, but there's not that many Scottish kind of sitcoms that come over the border as much as, say, maybe drama films and plays might do. But there might be some people in the comments who might be able to give a greater insight into the difference between Scottish and English comedy. But I know the Irish have a particular style, I think, which is different to the English. I'm babbling. The answer to that question is I'm not too sure, Mike.
Yeah, it's a tough question, but this is why we have you on here, to answer things that I couldn't dream of answering. So when it comes to Legacy Watch, John, I'll admit that Larry would be the one cast member that if we heard was not returning for series 2, I would say, okay, that I'm surprised that there's anyone that's not returning. But if it was going to be somebody, Larry Dean would make sense because he seemed to be the only one to struggle, John.
Yeah, I think the data tells that story, unfortunately, but I will say he really came on strong towards the end of series 1. So you would think that the momentum is with him, that either he got better at the show or the show made a concerted effort to put him into the show. Another factor to consider is that Hamed was mostly absent for the final episode of the series. So in that case, you kind of, and wasn't really in the second to last episode either. So you kind of are down one male when considering things, where he did really well in the finale. So look, is it possible that Larry comes back next year and just really shoots up the power rankings? I think we'd be better off for it. But from a Legacy Watch perspective, I have to agree with you, Mike. I do think that if there was one cast member non-update, doesn't come back, and that's it, like, I would understand where we're coming from here. I would just think it's a shame given how he seems to have a diverse viewpoint and sense of humor.
For sure. And it's also interesting to think about how these cast members viewed the show going into a first series. Because when you're joining the cast of SNL US, you know that you could be one and done, feet to the fire, or you could be like a 10-year vet at some point. Everyone started somewhere. But with a brand new show, you don't really know what the launching point is. Is it going to be 2 series? Is it going to be 10 years? It's really difficult to say. So Legacy Watch, Nathan, for Larry Dean's arc on SNL, yet to be told, but what could you see happening in your crystal ball?
I think with him getting the coveted position of playing King Charles, I think he's got a great future ahead of him. And I think if they lean into more impressions, a little bit more stand-up on Weekend Update, he could be a common watch for SNL UK.
Absolutely. So let's move on to a cast member that, if you asked me after watching the Tina Fey episode to start the series, I thought would have been a lock for top 5 in the power ranking. And he had one episode later in the season, Amy Lou Wood, that topped it in screen time. But that's Mohammed Animashaun, who just made his presence known so quickly on the Tina Fey episode, appearing over and over and over with Boovies Ghost of the Films, with the Internet HQ, being Lammy in the cold open. It was just like, okay, this is somebody that I should learn their name. Like, I'm going to be seeing this guy a lot. Here are his stats: a 98.1 in the power ranking for 8th place, 46 minutes, 30 seconds in screen time, a even 4.0 sketches per episode in 32 segments over those 8 episodes, 2 live from London's. His average screen time per episode, factoring in those late season episodes, 7 and 8, that's the Waddingham and Gatwa episode where he had under 3 minutes total. Average per episode was 5:49. Average screen time per appearance was 1:25. He led the power ranking in the whole cast in the Amy Lou Wood episode, which I think I would consider my favorite. So he did win the night one of the 8 weeks. So, John, interesting person to talk about here, because talking about lack of diversity, lack of voices in other areas in SNL in the US, and now you have somebody that comes in and like, okay, this guy might run the show after 1 week, and then really kind of just tapered off a little bit, but definitely didn't discourage me.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit bad timing, that end of season run, where I'm not 100% sure, but my understanding is he had some sort of pre-commitment to that finale weekend prior to the show extending. I was told maybe it was his honeymoon, what do we call honeymoon again, Nathan, in the UK?
Honeymoon is honeymoon.
Oh, honeymoon's honeymoon. All right, there you go,
Yeah,
or something like that.
stag do is a bachelor party,
Okay,
and
yeah,
hen do is the
the bachelorette party. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we got it right. But yeah, I was told that maybe that there was something that was happening that was booked and he could not get out of it for the final episode. But it was just a shame that the second to last episode, he also didn't really have much going on there. He had that big moment on Weekend Update, but it was kind of a ho-hum end of the season for someone who I think is really cool, an incredible delivery, and really blew me away as well, Mike, when I saw him join the show and he did the boobies thing in the first episode. The Riz Ahmed episode, he had two great bits with the OG FM, that radio thing with Riz where he started rapping. He did the Easter Bunny at the end of the week. You really felt something great with him. The following episode, he follows it up with the Mastermind sketch where he's the host there. And then episode 6, Amy Lou Wood just crushes that episode. That Dangerous Woman pre-tape, which I believe Celeste was the major writer behind it, but he's a major focus of that. He then does the lip reader on update of the Trump and Royals visit, and then that pork sketch, of course, that we see at the end of the episode where he's part of the pork committee. I mean, there's just so many things that you get to see from him throughout the season. I'm very excited. To me, he's one of the best parts of this entire series. His numbers just don't reflect that because we had such a weird last quarter of the season.
Yeah, it all came down to averages at the end of the day for screen time, for power ranking, everything SPE. Because if we saw just kind of middle of the road episodes to wrap up the series, it would be a much different story. I think he would be top 5 as predicted. And I should note that there is a big chasm between Anya, Paddy, and Larry and Hamed. Like, that's just because they fall in that order doesn't mean he's really closer to them. He's closer to the next person we're going to see. But Nathan, what was maybe a favorite moment from him that you saw this season? Because I just felt like, again, this guy might be the star of the show. Episode 1, we saw so much Fouracres, so much Shep, and so much Hamed.
It's the pork sketch. The pork sketch is my favorite sketch of the whole season. Am I right from my little bit of research? Was it Hamed, Al, and George that wrote the pork sketch? I think there's a little crew.
Right.
There's a little crew. They seem like they're making a little team with a similar sense of humor, and you can get the sense when it's those three who are working on sketches. I really warmed to him. He didn't take me by storm to start with, but there's just something about him, and he seems to really make the other cast members giggle as well. I think he's great, and I can't wait to see more of him.
He might have had one of the most impactful F-bombs too, because we saw Tina Fey in the monologue and with interacting with Michael Cera, talking about how, we can swear here. And then you kind of forget about that. And then you go to a live sketch. It's Tina Fey, Jack Shep as the movie stars, Hamed playing Boovie, obviously, and then just saying, "It fucking sucked." And I was like, oh yeah, that's what we can do here. So what a great delivery in that moment. Also, Doctor Who with Amy Lou Wood and the Jamie Dornan at the end of the episode with that wild sketch that he really had to do a lot of the straight man in, just from what was going on, John, in that sketch, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, where he cut his testicles off.
That's right.
I think that he's so forceful, and it's something like, I don't know if everybody notices this when they're watching it on screen, but if you go on their social media, you see it. It seems like him and Al Nash have become really good friends. They're both very tall, larger in stature men, and I think that there is a difference between them in sketches in the way that they perform. And I think that Hamed is very forceful in his delivery in the best way possible. I think that every line that he delivers, if you're not looking at the screen, are then just captivated. You just turn and you're like, oh my God, what did he just say? Even if he's not swearing, I do think that there's something that just about him, that he is just so great at delivering lines in sketches. He feels like a very powerful performer. I think that Al is great in his own way, but he does a little bit more quieter, softer spoken delivery in the way that he does some of his sketches. And I think that that was a really important distinction that we got between the two of them, and why we have a different, both of them in this cast, but they feel different in sketches. So that was great for me to get to see throughout the season. But yeah, I mean, to me, he's one of the guys that if you're starting to narrow down the cast in any way, I'm for sure keeping him, because I just feel that he's so important to the development of this series, that he's going to have some really big moments. And I wish we would have seen something in the finale from him. But, you know, we did get him at least in a pre-tape for a very brief bit.
And also, it should be known is he just turned 35 last month, but has a pretty impressive background. I know that the term "not ready for primetime players" is not really relevant in this age. Kind of goes back to the original SNL US cast. But for someone at that age, like, he's been in a lot of stuff. Like, he has a lot of experience on camera. He's done theater. Like, he's been on what was it, the Black Ops on BBC One and Wheel of Time. And there's like some people might have recognized him just from watching, you know, BBC One and seeing something like that. So, and when it comes to SNL US, a lot of times the credits might be almost nothing, or, you know, in terms of Asha Padilla with the Groundlings background and taking over the show. So this is somebody that just feels really comfortable on camera and kind of just can own the frame because, like John said, his delivery, his look. And I'm excited to see his series too, maybe more than anyone because of what I saw early. And I just like to see someone like him on the show. And I like to see him pair with a Fouracres or a Shep because of the difference in delivery and look. I think works well. But good point about him and Al. Legacy watch, John, as the first series wraps up, where, you know, I don't think it's going to be one and done for anybody, as we'll probably say a few times tonight. But what could you see happening in, let's say, a 3-series arc for Hamid?
Oh, I think there's going to be a lot of great moments, but even moments that I think are even better than what we got in series 1. I think he's underrated. Sure. I think that all of these moments that we're talking about here are, you know, the diehard moments. I think maybe movies from the premiere, because so many people watched it, people will remember the F-bomb. But I think that he hasn't really had his breakout mainstream moment yet. I'm waiting for that time where, you know, sort of like the, you know, Fouracres Mario sketch where everyone's like, oh my God, did you see this? Without even considering it's from SNL UK or who's in it. I don't think we've had one of those from Hamed, and he's so made for those moments. So I'm looking forward to getting one of those in series 2. And I think from a legacy perspective, you know, like a little bit more quieter than, you know, a resume than I would have expected at this point, but potential for greatness.
Nathan, final thoughts from you on the legacy?
Yes, I just want to say John hit the nail on the head there about his forceful delivery. I think that's why it took me a little bit of time to warm for him, because on his first few episodes, he was what I thought was over projecting a little bit too much, and it was quite a forceful delivery. But I just warmed to him, and I in these kind of little moments where he's playing these lovely little characters and his lines, he just gets them so right. I think he's going to have a great season 2. I think he'll come back with such power and force that I think those last 2 episodes will seem like a faint memory.
For sure. So let's move on to the next cast member, who is a fellow Londoner with Nigerian descent, Ayoade Bamgboye, who is somebody that had a very balanced stat sheet, was kind of in everything, didn't stand out a lot in some episodes, but was kind of everywhere. I'm surprised, John, the segments was that low, because I felt like even when it was a small part, Ayoade was present for it. So here are her stats: 102.4. So we have our first cast member with over 100 power ranking, which is a really stellar number in the US cast. So now we have 6 more ahead of Ayoade. 47 minutes, 45 seconds for her. 2 live from London's, 30 segments, good enough for a 3.75 SPE. So Hamid was at a 4.0. This is a 3.75. The breakdown: live sketches about 63%, pre-tapes 12.3%. Weekend update came in the second episode, In the 6th and the 8th, we saw her at the desk, 11.4% there. And one of the few people that did not appear in the Nicola Coughlan monologue. So we did not see her in a monologue this season. Average screen
I will
time.
say she helped write that monologue, though. So credit to her.
She was busy. Yeah. So 5 minutes, 58 seconds per episode. That's a great number as well compared to US. 1 minute, 36 seconds per appearance over those 30 appearances. So back to back, speaking of diversity, we have, two of the cast members of color have Nigerian names and backgrounds. And then we saw at the end of the season, she had 6 minutes, 48 seconds with Gatwa, 8 minutes, 20 with Riz Ahmed, 7:51 with Jamie Dornan. So those were her 3 best episodes. Nathan, what did you like from Ayoade this season?
I thought she was a great addition on Weekend Update. I think that she has a lot of potential, but I need to see more of her, to be honest. I want to see some great sketch characters. I want to see some bits of silliness from her instead of just more straight person in the background. Controversial, I'll go.
No, that's completely fair, because I think Larry Dean early on, other than being Scottish, we don't want to silo somebody into just a descriptor of the person. That other than being Scottish, you kind of said maybe if you weren't familiar with her stand-up, then you wouldn't really know what his tone was in the show. I felt like Ayoade, same thing. That 3 8 episodes, I don't really know what her brand is yet. Not a lot of credits to look at compared to Animashaun, but I'm looking at the longest appearances. Of course, the Gluing Raps, that musical sketch with Jamie Dornan, where a lot of people racked up screen time. That's over 3 minutes. And then Glasses of Wine with Hannah Waddingham, another musical live sketch, 3 minutes 7 there. And the football club sketch with Jack Whitehall, 3 minutes 6. Did get some good cold open time, so she had some impressions there and popped up once in a while. And then I think the OG FM that John mentioned earlier with Hamid, that was a good one with Riz Ahmed, to really have like kind of a duo kind of pair and not just be like one of the gals, John.
Yeah, she also had a couple pre-tapes. The Mr. Bagley pre-tape that we saw from the Jack Whitehall episode that Humphrey Kerr was very much behind, but she had obviously a very large role in. The Birds of Praise pre-tape that we got in the Shooty Gatwa episode, where we got to see a lot more of her, what I felt like. But I think she's going to ultimately be known for, in her first series, her update appearances, where she goes on to update 3 times, once as a fertility expert, twice as sort of herself talking about finances and all this. And then Martin Lewis is going to come on at the end, and we get the end of this running bit that they've had for a few episodes where she's just in love with Martin Lewis. And it's a cute thing. I liked it, but it's not anywhere near the level of impact that we saw from the performers ahead of her on this list. So I'm with you, Nathan. I do feel like we need to see way more from Ayoade. I think that she kind of reminds me a little bit of Ego in her early seasons, and it's not just because of their shared heritage or background. It's really just more because of, when they're being used, they seem to be used for long periods of time, but overall, in terms of quantity, we just don't have as many appearances from them. And that does tend to happen on SNL US with people of color a lot, where they find a way to be like, okay, this is their thing. We're going to put them in sketches when we need their thing, but then we're not going to use them. And it's way too early to say that that's what's happening with SNL UK, but I also haven't been convinced otherwise yet from the show.
Nathan, want to respond to that one?
I agree. I am utterly rooting for her. However, I just feel at the moment that she's just been... If you read her biography, she is relatively new to comedy. She had great success at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and I think she won an award. But I think you can tell that she's a little bit greener than some of the other performers.
Fair enough. And did appear as, while we have our British correspondent with us, John, as opposition leader, Badenoch. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, correct.
Oh, okay. Wow. Big win for me. Okay. So is that somebody that we'll be seeing more in British politics in series 2?
Possibly. I would say that 5 years ago, it would have been Starmer versus Badenoch, but because of the chaos that is British politics with third and fourth parties all getting involved with Reform and the Greens and the Lib Dems, the Conservative Party are dropping in popularity so much, which is a shame because it would have been a great piece for her to focus on more. But Kemi Badenoch is just not in the news.
And if she was, I would be thrilled for Ayoade that there's a role to hand to her. I will just say, though, to some of our UK listenership who might not be as in tune with the American show, that sometimes the audience does feel it's a little bit of a catch-22 when those happens, because you see it and then you're like, oh, great, I'm happy that she got the role. But if she wouldn't have got the role if she didn't look exactly like her or was able to play her, then is it really impactful in the way that they're growing as a performer? So that's the thing, is that sometimes in American politics, we say, okay, this person kind of looks like this cast member or this celebrity, so let's shoo them into the impression, and then we're accomplishing and ticking off a box. I don't think we want Ayoade just to be there and grow by ticking off boxes for this show. I think even if she is greener than the other performers, I think we want to find Ayoade live sketches, Ayoade pre-tapes that feel really, really strong and feel like they're her voice on the show. Mike said we don't know her brand yet. I'm still figuring it out myself. I will say, if you're walking out of the series one, Mike, that Birds of Prey sketch that we got in the finale, I think that was a really big moment for her, because it felt like, I know Hamed was in there briefly. We had Shudi Gatwa leading it, but it really felt like Ayoade's piece, and I was excited to see that coming out of the series one.
Yeah, we're going to have a couple cast members that are probably talk about musical sketches. And that one was not really, it was musical themed, but more about the comedy. And I will say, to pivot to Legacy Watch, that I wish her self appearances at Update were a little bit more memorable. I feel like that's such a great way to get to know people and can introduce you to their brand, kind of facilitate that. Talking about this season's rookies on SNL US and how we got to be introduced to them, where there wasn't really something that was a through line for me that I can go back to. And I did rewatch her most recent one last night, but that's something that's a good avenue for people that don't have the sketch leads. But John, you look confused.
Yeah, I mean, it's your take, so I'm not arguing whether you found it memorable, but I do believe her Update performances were memorable. I disagree with you in that sense. I think that there was a hook there. I think there was a running through line, and I think that her and Paddy working off of each other, where she was sort of, almost like demeaning Paddy in some points, in a joking part of the bit way, I think was a really good moment for her. So that's why I think that in months' time, unfortunately, we're not going to remember any of the other roles from Ayoade once the season starts to wash away a little bit, if you're not like the diehard who's into this. But I think you will remember her on Update.
I think the Paddy interplay was probably what I remembered the most, because she was almost facing him more than the camera. If you look at that again, it was really emphatic and kind of just like gesturing towards Paddy more than the viewers at home. So Nathan, Legacy Watch for Ayoade going into a series 2 potentially.
I think if anybody was to be in a touch of danger, which I don't think anybody is, I would probably say Ayoade's not had the impact that we all wanted for season 1. And I hope that herself and everybody involved in season 2 can focus on giving her some material which is entertaining and brings out her personality.
Definitely. And we saw a lot of female ensemble pieces that definitely got her to rack up some screen time. To go on John's comp to Ego, it's different because of featured players for sure, but it did take, to his point, some time for her to get going, looking at her screen time of averaging under 2 minutes for rookie year to 3 minutes the second year. So, a decent over a minute jump to then to 4 minutes and then to 5. So there's that runway that you can take. Hopefully in the UK version, it's not as long of a runway, but definitely someone that I'll be interested to see storyline wise, John, entering the second series, because like Larry Dean's kind of like, oh, prove it to everybody that maybe you should be top 5 in this cast.
Yeah, and I think that there's a good chance that every one of these cast members does come back for series 2. I think that she should have a bit of a chip on her shoulder. It's not that she did badly or that she didn't have a good series 1. I just don't think that she had these huge moments that some of the other cast members did. And either she needs to find a way to get there or the show needs to find a way to use her in that sense. But, part of this is that they hired a lot of great cast members. They have a lot of great writers. Maybe some of the writers move into the cast. Maybe some of the cast become writers. I don't know what they're going to shuffle for a series 2. So I think that, the whole production team did an amazing job making this feel like an ensemble, but they need this show to be the best it can be for it to get a series 3. And I think that if we end up going, 4, 5, 6 episodes into series 2, where we now have a 12 episode run at least. So let's say we get halfway through and we still haven't had a huge live sketch moment for Ayoade, I would be concerned.
For sure, after more episodes to dig into the data for. But we have now reached the halfway point, so halftime break right now. We're gonna introduce the next big kind of leap. I mentioned that from Larry Dean to Animashaun, there was a huge gap. Larry being at 83 to Hamed being at a 98.1, 4-point gap up to Ayoade. Now it's another 8-point jump to Annabel Marlow, who is somebody who did not make a big splash in the first episode, but made one of the biggest splashes, if I don't name someone named Jack Shep or George Fouracres, in the Jamie Dornan episode, which she had 12 minutes and 41 seconds, really took over the show that night in the hostage sketch and then the gluing rap. So we got to really see her vocal abilities as like a really talented singer and her acting abilities of when we see a rookie host, which, these other than Tina Fey, these are, generally all new hosts to this, varying degrees of comedy or sketch backgrounds. But that sketch hostage that I'm mentioning, it was really like Jamie Dornan and her holding it down for a pretty long sketch. And I thought she was just absolutely fantastic in that. We got to see her singing later in the night with the gluing raps, and we got to see more singing as the season went on. So SNL always has room for a attractive woman who can sing. We've seen that with Cecily Strong and others in the SNL US. But here is the stats for Annabel Marlow: a 110.1 power ranking for 6th in the cast, 33 segments, which got her a 4.13 SPE, 54 minutes and 40 seconds total screen time, so did not quite reach that hour, but averaged 6 minutes 50 per episode. Of course, the Jamie Dornan episode got that number way up, but also Jack Whitehall, 9 minutes 18. She made her Weekend Update debut that week. 7:49 with Nicola Coughlan, and then a 9:33 with Hannah Waddingham. So I guess the female-led episodes, hosted episodes, were good for her. And of course, the Jamie Dornan and Jack Whitehall as well. So we saw some peaks and valleys because Amy Lou Wood and Ncuti Gatwa's episode were lower with the Tina Fey. The pie chart here, we have 63.5 in live sketches, about 20% in pre-tapes, closer to the Larry Dean number I mentioned earlier of 21, 4.9% update, 5.7 in cold open, so didn't see her a ton there. Not much red on the chart, just in episode 3, 4, and 8. So, John, Annabel Marlow was someone that I think we almost couldn't recognize in the first week. And then episode 2, all we could do was talk about her.
I agree completely. I think that, she kind of reminded me a little bit of Lorraine in the original era of the show, where Jane and Gilda kind of made their mark a little bit quicker. And then Lorraine, it took a while till we started to get sketches from her, but then she found her path. She was 5 or 6 years younger than the other women on the show. And Annabelle does come across a little bit younger than the other women in the cast. But she blew me away in the Jamie Dornan episode. You could not have, I've never put any money on what we ended up seeing that night, which was a dominant episode for her. We were coming off Jack and George having this incredible night in the premiere, and then Annabelle out of nowhere just coming in and having the gluing raps and the hostage sketch back to back was just so great. And then we really saw her pairing up with Jack for a lot of this season. And I think that was important for her. I mean, being connected to the person who was number 1 in the power rankings, this is, just our view of it is, great by design, because you're going to end up building up those stats like crazy and being in a lot of sketches. But Nathan, it was the Hannah Waddingham episode that you were on. I was not with you that night to cover it on the after show, but if I had been with you, I would have said that I think Annabel Marlow might be becoming my favorite cast member. She's such an incredible singer. She may be one of the best singers we've had on any version of Saturday Night Live. And I know it's not a singing show or a singing competition show, but the fact that she's able to work it into comedy so well, it does remind me a lot of the SNL digital shorts that we used to get, where Andy Samberg was not a professional rapper, but he was the closest thing to it. And the raps were so good and so funny, and people loved them, not because they were just funny concepts, but because they were great rap songs that also were funny. And I feel like Annabel can do the same thing with music in sketches. So for me, the excitement is to the roof when it comes to Annabel.
I agree. I think it's very important to have a cast member like Annabel in the cast. She gives me a lot of Cecily Strong vibes with that kind of musical theatre style background. Of course, she is the sibling of one of the creators of Six, which is huge. And I think that it's really important that we, the UK has a great musical theatre scene, and I think it does need to be represented in that way. Looking at the screen time by episode, you're looking at them, and you've got the Jamie Dornan episode, which was quite heavily musical. And then, of course, the Hannah Waddingham, she was going to have a great bit of screen time there. I would have liked to have seen her in more prominently in other sort of episodes. I'm worried that she's getting a little bit into this kind of musical box. And I think, as we've seen from that Hostage sketch and some of the stuff that she's done with Jack Shep, she is more than that. And I hope next season they don't just make her Miss Musical. That's my worry for Annabel.
I think that Jack Shep pairing with Annabel could be something huge to watch in series 2. That's like just having that type of friendship look on screen is big. And Nathan mentioned earlier with like the Gen Z appeal. I think Annabel can have that as well, which would be big for her. Glasses of Wine, and what was the other one? British theme pub. I'm saying songs that haven't left my head since I heard them the first time. And she was a big part in both of those. Man, I can't get enough of British theme pub. But I think with Nicola Coughlan, that cabin murder sketch, she had some pops in there, and the 1930s gay couple with Jack Whitehall, there was some good moments, and late in the night for that sketch. But I think this is somebody that SNL UK is handling better than SNL US would so far. There's always, like I said, room for put pretty girl in sketch, but I feel like I got to know her more from her performances than just the roles themselves, if that makes sense. Whereas originally it was, okay, we have Ania Magliano, so it's AM, and we have Annabel Marlow and AM, and I didn't know going in, like, who had the fan page. Oh, it was Annabel Marlow. Like, I had to kind of learn the differences before it, and then it became really apparent that I was looking at Sidi or Celeste Dring. So I'll pivot to Legacy Watch, John, because we saw Chloe Trost in SNL 49 be maybe the best singer we've seen on that show. And she was one and done, was known for music, maybe would have been put in that box that Nathan's mentioning. And that did not work out for Chloe Trost, but I think it will for Annabel. So Legacy Watch for Marlow.
Yeah, but I think she's Chloe Trost plus, because it's these two things. To me, the reason Annabelle's working is because both things are happening for her. She has the musical thing, which is becoming her thing. And I agree with Nathan. There is the danger of just being put in a box. But in combination with being paired with one of the stars of the show in Jack, I feel that having both really makes everything feel fresh with her. It would be as if Chloe Trost had her season 49, had her moments in all of those live sketches and pre-tape singing, but then also had a pairing with Bowen where Trost and Bowen became a thing in 49. You would walk away and you'd be like, all right, well, even more, there's no way they're going to get rid of Chloe Trost. So I think for me, there is a lot of potential to see her grow. If I had to add anything, though, I would love to see more impressions from her. I sort of feel that this is, what everything and what all the producers in the US were looking for from Chloe Fineman. I sort of feel like we get that in Annabel Marlow, except that obviously Chloe is like a really strong impressionist, and has been able to showcase that. I would love to see that from Annabelle, but I wonder if that's something that she grows into. I think that she, like I said, comes across young, is a little bit young. And I think that, she's not going to get the Melania Trump role or some of the like maybe slightly older female roles that will go to someone like Emma Sidi or Celeste Dring. But perhaps if she's on the show long enough, she grows into them and works up her impression chops. And if she has that, then I think she's the full package.
Yeah, I could see her becoming very famous from this show. I know sometimes I mentioned on the By the Numbers last week for US that there's a difference between being a fan favorite and being like high Q rating, like someone on the street knows who they are. And I feel like Annabel Marlow could be somebody that could break through from not just the show. And that's exciting because it brings more eyeballs to the show and success for the show. It's not always just on screen because you want people to know who these people are, want to tune in for it. So Nathan, what do you think about a legacy watch for Annabelle going into a series 2?
I guess the big thing about Annabel Marlow is because she is musical theatre royalty or part of a musical theatre family, is what happens when Andrew Lloyd Webber or Lin-Manuel Miranda wants her in a new show. Who's going to be trying to pull her away from that? Because it depends on how deep she is into SNL or into musical theatre, because she wouldn't be able to do both. So I think that's a factor in there, is will other things be calling? And I'm sure this is another discussion we'll have later on in the power rankings. What about if Hollywood or West End or, films and are pulling some of these cast members out of doing this? I think she'll have a great season 2, but it'll be interesting to see what happens after that.
That's a great point that we haven't really brought up tonight. We talk about stand-up dates being moved for, Paddy and possibly Ania to signify a return. But yeah, I know maybe it's too early to say that, but it's never too early if the right call comes to your phone and you say, hey, this is a really fun time at like an 8-episode summer camp with my friends, but now I'm going to be starring in the West End. So I can't rule it out, Nathan. I'll put it that way. John, let's move on to a tie. After the first 8 episodes, we still had all that data and got a tie. We had to go to the second decimal point to get Al Nash in 5th place and not 4th place. So we'll find out who's in 4th in a moment. But at a 112.70 compared to the 112.73 we're about to see, that's the power ranking for Al Nash, 5th place, 49 minutes, 53 seconds. First 2 episodes weren't great screen time wise. Episode 3 and 4, which was Riz Ahmed, Jack Whitehall, he had 9 minutes and then almost 11 minutes respectively right there. Had 4 live from London's recurring impression as Churchill, which was fun, especially matching the look of someone who has the stature of Churchill is not always easy in an ensemble of 11. 38 segments for a 4.75 SPE. Saw him on Update a fair amount. Episode 1, 3, 4, a little bit in 7, and also in 8. That's 16% of his season, 58.9% in live sketch, a little over 10% in pre-tape, almost 14% in cold open. Never led the cast in power ranking, came close in the Whitehall episode. He finished 2nd in the Gatwa, 3rd in Waddingham, and Coughlin he finished 5th. So a couple top 5 finishes there amongst the cast. I'll start by saying this is the only cast member that I was already a fan of, following him on Instagram and watching his videos. That one that stands out was when they would do the this or that, and it was like Charlie XCX or Chappell Roan. He's like Chappell Roan or Dua Lipa. He's like Chappell Roan. And it was like, and then they just got to Lord of the Rings characters, and then it just kept hammering on that. So I really liked this stuff before, so I was excited to see a familiar face in a new show for Al Nash. So great to see him really come into his own early after the first 2 weeks weren't so great. And then I think became a staple, John. So what do you think about Al Nash and his place in this cast?
Yeah, you told the story. I mean, through the first quarter of the season, he was Captain Birdseye. He had a big role in that time change sketch, but I didn't feel like I knew who Al Nash was at all on the show. And it was just 2 episodes. It's so unfair to say, hey, you got to figure this out for week one and come out running. But by week number 3, he did come out and just showed off for week after week. And he has maybe the most stacked resume in terms of just really pushing his material on each episode from week 3 on. Maybe Jack, you could argue as well, but we got him in the OGFM sketch, the Skin to Skin on Update. He then does the Horse Trainer on Update in episode 4, the host of Millionaire to open up episode 5, that pork sketch, Footlocker, Adventures of Thomas. Like, he really just came on where it felt like every week he's coming in with a good idea. He's becoming one of the faces of this show. And I think there is something about him that when we were doing our season 31 rewatch podcast on Patreon this year, we talked a lot about Rachel Dratch, which was that she was the punching bag of that cast. And I do feel like Al Nash has a little bit of a, hey, I'm okay being the punching bag at times here, where you can kind of make fun of me on the show a little bit. And he takes it with a smile, but then he also has this really cool side to him as well. So I think he's layered, and it just took us a while for us to peel that onion. And I'm glad that we did.
Punching bag is a good term. I mentioned about Annabel fitting in the cast. There's always room for one of those in the cast, being a punching bag. I think we saw a good glimpse of it in the first episode, especially because he played the other half of the couple with Tina Fey in the Entourage skin cream first advertisement there. And it was just really fun to see a Tina Fey, like a legend like her, and just, taking some shots at Al there. So that was really the first kind of glimpse. And then seeing ultimately going to the end of the season in the Thomas the Tank Engine, where they just really made fun of him being fat. That was really the joke of the sketch. So that was really a through line, John. Nathan, were you familiar with Al, and what'd you like from him this year?
I wasn't familiar with him until he was cast in SNL UK, but I love him. I just think a term I like to use is he's just got funny bones. He really does. Just he can stand on stage and be saying nothing, but he makes me laugh. And I think a character like Al Nash would work wonderfully. A cast member like Al Nash would work perfectly in SNL US. I think they could really do with somebody like him, like a punching bag, like somebody who you would describe as more heavy set, as opposed to just a skinny white guy.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Nathan, by saying that I would love to see him in SNL US. That was one of the questions we did on By the Numbers this year. And I think he'd be a great choice. And, the diversity of look is one thing, and, having a British accent might help as well. But he just, seems like a really fun guy to hang out with, and just fits seamlessly into so many pieces that SNL US might have trouble fitting people into. And then you see Al Nash just kill it. The Footlocker sketch with Hannah Waddingham with these Phantom of the Opera, just brilliant there. And he did get the first update. That's a pretty coveted spot in SNL UK history, if this goes on for 51 seasons, that to be Captain Birdseye in the very first one. So I feel really good about his prospects of being a top 5 power ranking. I know we're talking about decimal points here, John, but maybe we'll say top 3, top 4. But let's move on to Legacy Watch there, or maybe other appearances we didn't mention yet.
Well, I kind of think that Al is the heart and soul of SNL UK right now. There are other people that are the faces of this show that are making impacts where you could sort of say that they're the star. But I think if you were looking at this show as a team, I think he's important to the chemistry of this cast. It feels like he's always trying to make everyone around him better. It feels that he's just has this happy smile. If you watch the good nights of SNL UK, he's the one giving everybody hugs, walking around, really rooting them on. I would throw this at Nathan because he's more familiar with the British, sports culture. But I just know for me, as being such a American and Canadian sports fan, sometimes you just need that guy on the team, that he's not the first star. He's not the one that's like leading the league in goals or whatever it is, but he is the one that really makes the whole engine go. And I do feel Al has a little bit of that from what I can see with my eyes. And for me, that is why I'm guaranteeing he will be back for sure next year.
Absolutely. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, he's there. He's an ensemble player. And we were speaking on the Hannah Waddingham episode that he only had these little tiny bits, but every time he just utterly knocks it out of the park. And that pork sketch, he carries that sketch so well. He's superb, and you are spot on there, John. He is the heart and soul.
Always need a glue guy, right, John? This is I was gonna say, I didn't say 6 minutes 14 per episode. Like, that's really good numbers for this runtime. 1:15 per appearance, and having someone like him in the cast who can do that short form content that I mentioned does translate well. And having the heart and soul of the room, I love that phrase for him. And yeah, British pork. Let's talk about that. Every person who appeared in that, because it was one of my favorites as well. Looking at other things with Al Nash, so I mentioned, Winston Churchill. That's a fun one, but he had nearly 8 total minutes over 5 appearances on a weekend update. So kind of the update champ of the season. Like, so that's a lane that I wouldn't necessarily have pegged him to fill, but he ended up doing it by being an update. 4 out of 8 episodes, which is pretty good.
Yeah, and even if you could say the start of the
appearances.
season, Mike, wasn't so great, I do think him being the only update correspondent for the premiere was an indication that the show believes in him.
And also for Legacy Watch too, talking about the history and having that first spot is, kind of getting the wheels greased for Paddy and Ania, and having Al come out there and just have a really fun piece. I thought was great. Any final thoughts, John?
Yeah, I'm just excited to see what we're going to get from him moving forward. I just think that, physically, as we said, larger in stature, has, the glasses, the mustache, the fun hair, just a fun look to him. And I think he is such a great pick for this show. And I think that in every sketch, when he comes into the sketch, you're already sort of waiting to laugh. And I think I had that once upon a time with Fred Armisen a lot, where, you never knew when he'd pop in. And then when he popped in, he was just going to do something a little bit offbeat, a little bit kooky for me. So I'm excited to see that translate even more into live sketches. Yes, he's the king of the update correspondent appearances this year, but I think there's even more to get from him. And you could just feel really great about the last 3 quarters of your season, Al.
Definitely. Let's go to the cast member who broke the tie by 0.03, and that's Emma Sidi at a 112.73 for 4th place in the cast with 51 minutes, 19 seconds, had a live from London at 5 out of 8 episodes, so pretty good stats there. 37 segments for a 4.63 SPE sketches per episode. And this is an interesting pie chart because of the cold opens. So we have almost a quarter, it's 21%, or a little over 21% in cold opens. Maybe most notably was the Melania, because it was really centered around her coming through the bushes there to interrupt the picnic. 48.9% in live sketch. So one of the few cast members we saw with a less than 50% in live, other than the update anchors. 13.3% in pre-tapes, 12.1% updates. So really colorful pie chart for Emma. There's only 2 episodes of the season under 5 minutes. Overall, a 6-minute 24 per episode. The under 5 minutes were the Jack Whitehall and Hannah Waddingham's. The best episodes, screen time wise, were back to back. Nicola Coughlan, 8 minutes 43, and then Amy Lou Wood, 7:56. Also, the first woman of the cast that we saw have a really pop out moment for the bra fitting sketch with Tina Fey. We saw Reggae Jean Page come into that one, and for the surrounds is now entered my vocabulary from Emma. So I really liked seeing a woman like her have a lane to fill when I've mentioned already having these women come in and not really knowing what they're going to do and how to differentiate. I thought Emma stood alone really early in that regard. Could play older, could play the mothers in sketches, or a wife more than maybe Annabelle. I guess we'll talk about that next too with Celeste. But this is an interesting one because also did some voice work, John. We do keep stats on that as well. And what do you think about Emma Sidi's first series?
What's funny is that she had a great first series of the show. I almost feel like the way that they designed this season hurt her, because to me, she's the leading woman of this cast, and they made such a concerted effort to get everybody involved that it does feel to me that they didn't use her to her full potential. Even if the pie chart looks great, even if she was in a ton of segments, even if she's fourth in the power rankings, I still feel like we didn't get the full Emma CD experience. And she was so great in the premiere where we come out and we see her at the end in that bra fitting sketch with Regé-Jean Page and Tina at the end of the night. The Melania impression, very important. Of course, we got The Woman Who Can't Be Ignored, was a big moment for her throughout the season. There's a lot of great moments that we did have with her. But to me, it does feel like they maybe let George and Jack a little bit more free to run around the show in the way that they didn't fully let Emma take a hold of her place in this cast, because I've seen nothing to indicate that she isn't one of the absolute stars of SNL UK.
She reminded me of cast members like, I know we always go top shelf, John, but like those Phil Hartmans or Jason Sudeikis, people that like can just run a sketch. We talked about the sketch drivers versus performers last week on By the Numbers. Is somebody that if you put Emma CD on stage, she's going to dictate the rhythm of it and make everyone around her better. So we do a lot of sports comps on this show, and players in locker rooms and in huddles and on the field that can do that just elevate people like an Al Nash or a Hamid Animashaun that can be more funny looking, bigger costumes, bigger emotions. And Emma can do that as well. So I feel like the sky's the limit for her, Nathan.
I think she's a machine. I think she's absolutely incredible. Her precision, her detail. When you watch that Woman Who Can't Be Ignored on Update, her hand movements, the beats, every moment has been thought of and sort of analyzed. She is a comedy machine, and she should be number one or number two in terms of power rankings. And I think she was robbed a couple of weeks of not getting the MVP as well.
Did lead the power ranking in one episode. That was the finale. Finished first there and came right around her screen time per episode average. So with the Gatwa episode 625, average 624 over the season, a minute 18 per appearance in those 37 segments. So let's go over to Legacy Watch, because I think our feelings on Emma are known at this point, that there's really nothing she can't do. So John, what do you want to see different from her?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do feel like it's tough, because the philosophy of SNL UK does feel like an ensemble, and maybe that's just the culture of the show that we're going to see moving forward. But there is a version of this show where she is number one or number two in the power rankings next year. And I want to see her just fully embrace the experience and be willing to take over when necessary. Going from having that bra fitting sketch, which felt very much in her voice, we were set up right away in the premiere of who this person is, and then the jewelry store sketch in episode 5 where she has the long finger, and you're watching this woman and you're like, whoa, this is unique. This is something that we don't have in any of the other cast members, and it just feels that she could take over the show as good as anybody else in this class. So for me, I'm struggling a little bit, Mike, with how I feel about her season, because I just can see that her potential is through the roof. It's as good as you can get among anybody here. And I would love to see her try and push even further for that. I just don't know if the show's going to let her.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I've kind of hinted on it, but I think they did a really good job with putting the women forward, but maybe not putting individual women forward. Like we saw women-led sketches that were in ensembles, especially the musical ones, like the end of year musical with Waddingham. She had a decent role in the Great Big Crabman sketch we haven't mentioned tonight, and Riz Ahmed, which I really loved, and having some cold open appearances that we got to, have women play female politicians and stuff like that. But
it's a great point, Mike.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you don't mind me just saying, I think that Jamie Dornan's episode we talked about as that being Annabelle's episode. I do want to see one of the next 12 episodes that we get in series 2, maybe 2 of the next 12. I want to see one of those being Emma's episode, because we have Emma's sketches and Emma's moments, but not Emma's episode.
Definitely. So like looking at the power ranking finishes, we saw, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 8 be top 5 finishes. So I think that if you take Emma Sidi out of this cast, we'd have a little different picture in our mind about the success of the season, Nathan. I think that's how much of an impact she's made, whether the eye test or the stats tell the story.
Nobody is playing big, silly characters. From the female performers as well as Emma. Emma's big characters are just dominating scenes when she gets the opportunity for them. I think her legacy next season is she's going to probably take it between her and George, in my opinion.
Yeah, you kind of inspired me to a thought that's been in the back of my head or my subconscious, which is she has an old school sketch vibe to her of having that willing to go broad and willing to go into being not just a silly character, but playing a character silly, if that makes sense. So if you look at old SNL, once in a while we see glimpses of it in new SNL, but that of what it means to play sketch, I think Emma just gets it big time, John, if you want to move on.
And I think she could do both, by the way. Even with, you see sunburnt lawyers in the Hannah Waddingham episode, she could play a silly character for sure. It's just silly in concept. And I think that her ability to play a ridiculous moment serious or a serious moment ridiculous, I think is unmatched among the other people in this cast.
Definitely. And so I could have called this a 3-way tie, to be honest. I'm mentioning these kind of gaps because as we're going from 11 to 1, it's easy to lose sight of really the difference between these cast members. I mentioned between Larry and Hamid, and I mentioned between Ayoade and Annabelle. So with Al Nash at a 112.7, Emma Sidi at a 112.73, we have in third place Celeste Dring at a 113.2. So less than a point difference between the fourth spot and the bronze medal font color here for Celeste Dring at a 113.2 for third place, 54 minutes, 39 seconds, 36 segments for a 4.5 SPE, had 4 out of 8 live from London's. Only one down episode in the finale. So we kind of missed Celeste in the Gawa episode, 2 minutes 38 there. Other than that, it was pretty even across the board with a huge pop with Jack Whitehall and 2 strong episodes in the 6 and 7 slot, Amy Lou Wood and Hannah Waddingham. Jamie Dornan, like John mentioned, 9 minutes, 9 seconds there. Emma Sidi, Annabel Marlow, and Celeste Dring all bringing the heat that week in week number 2. Never finished first in the power ranking, surprisingly, for being a third place finish. The breakdown was 64% live sketch. So we saw Celeste really have to put in the work in front of camera live on the show a ton with her breakdown. 4.3% update, saw her play the jockey when Al Nash playing the racehorse. And not really nothing much in the monologue, probably was the Coughlin one. 15% in the cold open, so we saw that come on in the last 3 episodes and in the Dornan episode. Somebody that I think had the slow simmer, I felt like I'm seeing big numbers on the screen right now, John, but I don't think that Celeste Dring, I guess maybe the shy baby sketch in Tina Fey, we saw her playing the pregnant woman, but there wasn't a lot there for me to become a Celeste fan. And then all of a sudden I just became a big fan for the falling down the hill with Helen Birch. So I thought that was amazing.
Well, I think she was really hurt by that being held back. That was ready for the premiere, and we didn't get to see it until episode 4. And had we seen that, I think everyone feels a lot better about Celeste coming out of the premiere the way that they did about George. So, almost a shame that the runtime of the show limited the ability to see that and change the perception of her. I do think that she did find a way to write sketches and get them on the show in a way that we've been talking about with Ashley. And I'll say that, there is a little bit of an Ashley Padilla comparison here, is that I think they both have unique voices. I think they both write for themselves. And I think it took them a while to figure out the way the show works. But I feel good about Celeste towards the end of the season, in that she wrote that Dangerous Woman music video. She gets that on the air. She writes the Glasses of Wine sketch, that musical moment that gets on the air. And even though Annabelle is more overtly musical, Celeste seems to have that within her as well. She's a little quirky, and I think that works for her. Normally, you wouldn't see someone who has a slight quirk to them at the top of a traditional SNL power ranking list, because they're not as generically used as someone like, let's say, an Emma. But in this case, it almost feels like the show granted her enough grace to find a way to get her voice on the show by just giving her utility roles until she felt that comfort. So her numbers look really good because they kept just putting her in sketches until she finally found a way to get her voice on the show. So that's sort of the story of her season to me.
For sure. I mean, 36 appearances in 8 episodes, already a great average. The screen time average as well, 6 minutes 50. So of those 36 segments, she averaged a minute 29 each. Nathan, do you have a favorite Celeste moment, or a moment that you said, oh, I think she's going to work out in the show really well?
I mean, that appearance at the end of the wine drinking one was something quite spectacular. She's just got this great classical period face, so she can play older. She can fit in anything which is not modern. And also, Celeste comes from quite a cult sketch show background. She was in a sketch troupe called Lazy Susan. So she's got this experience behind her as well, which is obviously helping with the writing. She can play big. She can play the straight person in the scene, and I think that's probably the reason why her power ranking is so high. It's because she's just a workhorse, really. You can put her anywhere.
Yeah, and it was one of the moments of the season too that episodes I should say, where she had 8 appearances in week number 4 in the Jack Whitehall episode. So saw her all over the place. I think, John, that's kind of as high as you can get right now in SNL UK. 8 appearances in a single episode. We saw Jack Shep and Al Nash do it. We saw it in the finale from Jack. We saw it from Al in the same episode of Celeste. So with 8 appearances in an episode, like, that's incredible stuff.
It is. And again, it just feels like they love her and they love using her in all these pieces. And I'm not surprised. It just feels a little bit untraditional for her comedy voice to be used as much as she is. There are so many people that do have that extra interesting layer to their personality and their look that we just never see in 8 sketches a night. So she's almost a bit of a chameleon in that she can go from being, just a random woman in a yoga studio or a mom or a sibling, to then playing an old woman or someone falling down a hill. It is incredible. And I wonder if she is the most adaptable performer we have on the show. And that makes her numbers look really good because the writers feel like they could basically put her in anything.
Also, it just needs to be said is that unlike the other women on this list, she has the Angela Rayner impression, and Angela Rayner is, big in the news at the moment with the Labour leadership sort of fight going on, which nobody else has, and that impression is so good as well. That's all I want to see. So she has that going for her as well.
So that'll be big for Legacy Watch. I will say about Celeste that seems super calm, confident in the live sketches. And we talked about this, we talk about it all the time with SNL, is breaking. She seems to be one of the people that like wouldn't break, like Chris Parnell, Iceman. Nathan, do you have an opinion on this discussion? And maybe it could translate to British versus American comedy. Is traditionally, do you think a British audience would appreciate the breaking, whether it be forced
They call
or
it
not?
corpsing, Mike.
Corpsing. All right, let's use that word. So, well, first of all, give me your opinion, but maybe speak on the frequency of it, and if it's like kind of a bad thing, a good thing, or somewhere in between.
Well, we're in the land of pantomime here, and pantomime, for those American viewers, listeners who are aware, every Christmas holiday season we do pantomimes. Pantomimes are big sort of fairy tale parodies, and they're full of cast members trying to break or corpse each other on stage. So it is part of our culture. I love in the pork sketch, which we seem to keep coming back to. I love that the corpsing through that. There's a lovely moment in the flying the plane sketch where is it Hamid says, "Oh, there's the link," and that breaks George. That was a wonderful moment. I think it's great. Do I want it to go down the route of the Ryan Gosling passing notes? Maybe not, but yeah, a little bit of corpsing now and then is brilliant.
And also seem to be able to play not only young women, older women, but like would play men a couple times. I think we saw that in the first episode, but I think Celeste is someone, I think might have been, I don't know who it was. Let me know. The two of you said the word chameleon. I think Chameleon Celeste is the legacy watch for me.
That makes sense. And Mike, tell me how you feel about this. She kind of reminds me of Heidi Gardner, and had they used Heidi to her full potential.
That's kind of where I was getting at, because we talked about it at length. I was saying the redeeming thing about the Beavis and Butthead break of Heidi wasn't the situation only. It was also the fact that we had a veteran like Heidi who is known for not breaking. So it felt like a shaken up bottle of soda that finally exploded, because it had never happened before, at least to our memory. Like, we couldn't remember a single Heidi Gardner break. Celeste does give me that vibe of somebody that's just like a pro's pro, doesn't break, can't get shaken up. Nathan, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think that she is going to be the workhorse, like I said, and she's a chameleon. You can put her in anything from a period piece to a mom in a modern piece. I think she's great.
John, final thoughts on Legacy Watch for our bronze medalist Celeste Dring.
I wouldn't be surprised if she's lower in the power rankings in series 2, but I don't think that's an indicator of her having a worse season necessarily. I think they may just unlock her in the direction that she wants to go with her type of sketch. And I think that may ultimately limit how much we stretch her in each episode. So the rankings and the numbers may not tell the full story of her longevity on the show. But that doesn't mean that if she is, let's say, 5th or 6th next year, that she hasn't improved as a cast member, because I think we're just starting to see where she could really go with the show.
Absolutely. And that's an important thing to note. I would say, too, as I mentioned, Hamid was my surprise to not be top 3, top 5. I did not think Celeste would be top 5, and here she is at top 3. So I think that is very fair to say that she might find her lane and ease into it rather than be the workhorse next year. It kind of depends on where they lean with Emma Sidi. Like, if Emma really takes over, or if we see Ania in sketches, Annabel Marlow rise, Celeste could find herself kind of in the middle rather than top 3. But here we are at our last giant gap, mind the gap. It's going to be George Fouracres, who stole all of our hearts at number 2. So I mentioned that three-way tie, Al Nash, Emma Sidi, Celeste Dring, all around 113. Well, here we are, John and Nathan, jumping up from a 113.2 up to a 145.7. An incredible power ranking, almost unthinkable if you really know the math of the power ranking algorithm. But he's in second place with 1 hour, 11 minutes, 5 seconds, 6 live from London's, including the very first one, in a recurring role that happened all season as Keir Starmer in 6 of those cold opens. 36 segments felt like more to me, but his screen time per episode was 8 minutes, 53 seconds, John. So that was like pretty crazy that there wasn't any episode other than that second episode. We mentioned a lot. Jamie Dornan, he went from a cast leading 14 minutes, 17 seconds in the Tina Fey premiere down to 2:39 just the next week. And that really was the story of his season because everywhere else was crushing it. Led in screen time, episode 1, 3, 5, and 6. Average screen time per appearance, almost 2 minutes at 152, 4.5 SPE. A big chunk in the cold opens, of course, 27%. Live sketch, 56%. Pre-tapes, 11%. A little bit on update in the Riz Ahmed and Hannah Waddingham. We saw him there. And a recurring role as impression of Attenborough, which is really cool. Happy 100th to Attenborough. That was awesome to see that come back. Did not think that would be a recurring impression, but here we are. Led the power ranking in the Riz Ahmed and Nicola Coughlan episode. And I have to mention the meta aspect, having a corner of SNL or SNL UK, 45 seconds with Fouracres, having his name be in a sketch. That's my legacy watch, and I'll start off the conversation there. Nathan, what is there to say about George Fouracres, who has stolen my heart?
I think he is, in my opinion, the big breakout star from series 1. I was watching some of his theatre on his Instagram when he was at the Globe, and you can just see there he knows how to control a stage, control an audience, and is such an ensemble player. He can play the dad. He can play crazy writers who write about seagulls. He can play Jules Holland. He can play anything. He is just it's just a masterclass in comedy acting from him, and it will be a sad day if he doesn't come back one series. It will be a great loss to the show.
Absolutely. John, is there an American or Canadian equivalent of this, of somebody that's literally played Hamlet, has done Shakespearean theater, going to sketch comedy or going to SNL? Because here's what we have in Fouracres: somebody who has the talent, the diction, the presence to play Hamlet on stage. And, he's done other Shakespeare as well. And then going into a cast like this seems kind of like on his own. Like, it seems like he could do anything. And the stats are just incredible. So, I already read them off, but I feel like we could talk about Fouracres for, 4 hours.
Yeah, we definitely could. And I would say that certainly I feel like the early 2010s cast was very theatrical in what they brought to the show. When you think of somebody like, Cecily or an 80, like, I felt like there was like a period where they were really leaning into stuff like that. Maybe, someone in the chat has an idea of someone pre SNL. I feel like Garrett Morris maybe a little bit too kind of had that. But yeah, overall with George, I mean, there's not a lot to say because everyone has said it. He is the absolute breakout star of this show. He's the one who, when you have a friend who hasn't seen SNL UK, you're sending one of George's sketches to them to say, all right, just give this one a shot, and then let me know if you want to watch the full episode or the full series, because he has so many big moments in this first series. And I look at that Jamie Dornan episode, and it was the most amazing night for Annabel, and I think it was strategic, but you can almost make the comparison to the Paul Simon episode back in 1975, where the second episode, they just tried this thing. Well, what if Paul just played mostly music all night and the cast didn't really appear? It was not the same. It's a little apples and oranges, but I do feel there was maybe some strategy of, hey, we just put George Fouracres, one of our cast members, out there for almost 15 minutes in the premiere. Maybe let's hold him back so that everyone doesn't think that this is the George Fouracres show. And I don't think it hurt the show, but it did hurt the data a little bit for him, where if not for that episode, if we just got an average episode from him, I think we're looking at total world domination from George Fouracres. And it is well deserved because he had so many amazing moments, Mike, in this first series.
Yeah, he had 8 appearances that were 3 minutes or longer. Usually a minute or longer is a metric I go for. Looking at 2 minutes, of the 36, 14 of them were 2 minutes or longer. And then if you go for the whole 1 minute, which includes, ironically, both 45 seconds with Fouracres, 28 out of 36. So that's good enough for a minute 52 per appearance. Just as I mentioned, Shakespearean seemed, I've already used this phrase, pros pro, could do it all, but I wasn't maybe seeing a ton of silliness in the first episode, playing the PM, playing Attenborough. And then when you get all the way to Al Nash and him shirtless for Skin to Skin, I was like, oh yeah, this guy will do that. Like he's not too good for that type of stuff. He can go silly and go a little wacky. So Update wasn't a part we saw a ton of him. We saw him with Riz Ahmed and Hannah Waddingham's episode Beyond Update. But Nathan, was there a favorite, if you had to say, Fouracres moment of series 1? And was it British Pork? Because that was one of the biggest ones.
I think that's the
all right.
answer.
Second favorite then.
But yeah, Blasted Seagull. Bastard Seagull was it? Sorry, it's 3 minutes to 2 here. My mind's going. The Fouracres one. Was it Bastard Seagull?
Yes,
it was. Yeah. Bastard Seagull, obviously 45 seconds with George Fouracres is the thing everybody was talking about, and just the consistency of those Keir Starmer sketches. He really has brought quite an endearing quality to a politician who is pretty much like a rock, and that is a skill of getting a politician and making them interesting and likable. It's quite incredible, really.
And John, the natural comp would be to James Austin Johnson playing the incumbent U.S. president in Trump, who I probably would say is the opposite of what Nathan just said. There's just so much that you could take on him that you almost don't know what to do other than repeat the news. With Starmer, you have to have a really sit down pen to pad and go, how do we want to portray Starmer on the show? Do we want to make it all wooden and the jokes about that, or take it somewhere else? And he also introduced Starmer to a US and Canadian audience way more, obviously. The PMs change a lot more frequently than presidents over here, but that was his entry into the door. He kept it going, but there's just so much more to talk about other than playing the PM. With James Austin Johnson, he almost feels like an albatross of playing Trump almost every week.
That's true. And I think that we did have a discussion about what James could learn from somebody like George, or what SNL US can learn from somebody like George to impart onto James. I think as far as George is concerned, he's kind of a dynamo where he has all of the qualities of the best versions of someone like James Austin Johnson or like a Dana Carvey. But he has this thing in his voice that I picked up on a little bit from watching some of his moments, where I almost feel that his voice is always on the verge of cracking, but it never does. And I think that is deliberate in the way that he performs sometimes, that it's just, there's something about it should be shaky. It should come out not confident, but it comes out so confident because he has this absolute swagger to his performances that he brings out in the way that he does it, where he can look out like a goofball, but there's still some strength to it. And it is a little bit of a unicorn moment where I'm looking at somebody that I don't think I've really ever fully seen before on this show. And that's so exciting for me. I think every version of SNL would love to have someone like George Fouracres. So he does come out and he does 45 seconds of Fouracres. We get to see him as Starmer. He has all these big moments in the premiere. And then eventually past episode 2, he does follow it up by having some really huge moments. But I do think it is the Mario sketch that everyone will be talking about from series 1. I think it was voted on multiple lists by trades as being the best sketch of series 1, but just him one-on-one with Amy Lou Wood having an argument in a silly costume in a beautifully designed apartment that looks exactly like it would be out of Mario's world, and him just going through all stages of fighting and drama. It was something that you would see from someone who had been on Saturday Night Live for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, not from someone who had been on the show for 6 episodes. So for me, he is the apex of what you're looking for from a performer. And now the question is how long can they keep him on the show? Because I think everyone who has ever watched Saturday Night Live and is in film production is watching George Fouracres and saying, how do I get a piece of that?
I had that same thought, and I couldn't put it to words the way that John could, as of talking about the voice of George. And I remember watching the premiere, and I did not know anything about this guy. And like, how lucky was I to get to discover him alongside a lot of our listeners and viewers. But I had the thought of like, is this guy Irish? He's giving me kind of Irish vibes, just coming from an Irish family. And then he hits me with what kind of Irish is your granddad in the very first episode. I was like, oh, okay, that's it. I know he's a Brit, but he's from, Irish heritage like I am. So I think that the range, though, that we're talking about is just so superb. The Mario sketch has to be mentioned. I think, John, he's like the only guy in the cast or cast member in general that could like have a best of DVD with 8 episodes. You could really put a lot of tentpole sketches, cold opens, update on a 30-minute reel based on his 1 hour, 11 minutes, 5 seconds that he got. So I can't say enough good things about him, but I feel that this show in series 1 just hit a grand slam by having him in the cast. And I almost fear what it would look like without him. That's how good he was. And that's not a diss to anybody else. It's just a compliment to how good George is.
I agree. I think he's the quarterback right now. And that may not be a great UK analogy, but still, it's the only thing that I could use to describe him. The striker. Yeah, exactly. And, they definitely need him. And I hope he's there for series 2 because he's a very important piece of what they do. It's also very rare when someone comes on as fully formed as George. Even, Ashley, who has become the star of SNL US in this era, she took a while to get going. You think of Will Ferrell, he took a couple seasons before he really found his form. You think about all the people, Kristen maybe is the closest comparison I would think of, where Kristen Wiig came on and she sort of had that thing going right away, but they didn't even use her to her full potential in her first season. So to me, it is really going back to that late 80s era of people like Phil Hartman and Dana Carvey, who they reinvented the cast, they brought on in season 12. And just in a few episodes, you could already see that these performers were incredible. And he is somebody who I think would fit into any era of Saturday Night Live. And I am just excited to see what we're going to get from him next.
So pivoting to Legacy Watch, Nathan, there's certain cast members that define eras. John saying you could put George Fouracres in any era. I would agree with that. But it's like Eddie Murphy, John Belushi. There's like certain faces and names that are synonymous with the cast. And I would say series 1, even though he did not finish with the top stats in the power ranking, is the face of the show as far as what you're seeing on screen. You can point to other people in the cast and saying they're more representative, but when you're talking about sketch comedy, the guy who's doing the best sketch comedy to me is George Fouracres. So Nathan, what is your legacy watch of having the star of the show, be right here with British Pork?
Well, here's a controversial take. I think his legacy is that they are going to change the way they look for future cast members, and maybe over in the States as well. We don't have, I don't want people to come for me with this. We don't have the institution of improv that the US has. We do have improv, and it is popular, but it's not the go-to area like it is in the States. Obviously, they've gone for lots of stand-up this year, but maybe they'll be looking now, going, well, maybe it's actually from the theatrical route where we're going to get that level of quality, and maybe that's something that they might look to in the United States. That the pulling Annabelles and Georges from the theater. Why aren't we doing the same? So I think that might be an interesting look on legacy there.
Yeah, it could have a ripple effect of being a blueprint. John, did George write a lot of sketches that people might not be aware of, or was he? I think about theater performers, and I think about people who can memorize lines quickly. They can learn blocking quickly. Like those are the skills they pick up from that background, but not necessarily always being a writer background from coming from theater.
I believe so. I believe, we were talking about Bastard Seagull. I think that's one that he had a huge hand in. Obviously, 45 Seconds with George Fouracres, the Who Will Land the Plane sketch. I think a lot of those really came from his mind. It is interesting. I think this is probably part of a larger discussion we could do on a different podcast about theater and its effect on the show. Sometimes it is kind of like our conversation with singing, where you can be boxed into being overly theatrical. Somehow it just really works for him. So for me, it's not a concern. But yeah, if there was one thing you could look for to maybe squint and say, okay, what could we want to watch out for in the future? Is it possible that the solo performing just gets to be too much? But I can't even imagine it, Mike. It's just been too exciting.
I want to shout out also the work of Gothic Horror with Riz Ahmed, which is another early Fouracres moment that didn't get enough attention, which I really liked. So I want to throw that one out there. But final thoughts on seemingly the favorite amongst the viewers, John. We're going to move on to the gold medalist here.
George Fouracres is definitely the star of SNL UK right now. And, once you have no pressure on you and you come into this show, it's you got to basically do what you want. But there is pressure now, George. You got to follow it up with a great series too, to continue to cement your legacy and get to the top of the mountain. And I'm sure he will be saying, I don't need to be this. I'm just doing me. I love being on the show. I love being with my team, and I love making sure that the episodes are as great as they possibly can be. But everybody wants to leave a legacy, leave a mark. Maybe SNL UK goes for 10, 20, 50, 100 years, who knows? And George could be the first one that you start thinking about building that statue in front of the SNL UK studio.
Love it. And sounds like John's take right there reminds me of a take he made last week about Ashley Padilla, who was the winner of the power ranking in commanding fashion for SNL US, beating Colin Jost by almost 18 points from 1 to 2, which is a gap we haven't seen since we've been podcasting on By The Numbers. So let's take a look at who won the top prize here of SNL UK. And that, of course, is the one remaining cast member, Jack Shep, all in gold here, number one, with a 161.1 power ranking. And that number might not mean anything on its own, but comparing to an Ashley Padilla and a cast of 16, was 17 with Bowen Yang in it, had one of the most dominant seasons we've ever seen since the SNN's been in existence. She had a 108.7. Jack Shep has a 161.1, just never took his foot off the gas. The shorter runtime, of course, gets the percentage of screen time higher, so that explains some disparity in the two shows. But a 161.1, when we just talked about Fouracres, who was at a 145.7, the difference is definitely notable. Here are his stats. 1 hour, 18 minutes, 45 seconds. Good enough to lead the cast there. 42 appearances. That leads the cast there. So he's our first SNL UK Triple Crown winner. Congratulations to Jack Shep. Everybody clap. 5.25 sketch per appearances in those 42 segments divided by 8. 5 live from London's, and that was in 17.9% in cold opens was the screen time. 53.1% in live sketch, 16% in pre-tape, and about 10% weekend update. Average 9 minutes, 50 seconds per episode. Just truly incredible to almost hit 10 minutes an episode when the runtime is shorter. That's why I'm bringing that up, because I'm trying to show everybody that having stats of this stature, alliteration intended, is impressive even more so. So 13 minutes 10 led the Jack Whitehall episode. 10:32 led the Hannah Waddingham episode. Surprisingly enough, those are his leading episodes, but he did finish 5 seconds behind George Fouracres in the premiere. Only the Riz Ahmed episode was under 6. That was 5:25. He had 6:38 in the Shooty Gatwa episode. Other than that, they're all almost 9 minutes, explaining his near 10-minute average. 1:47 per appearance led the power ranking in Tina Fey's, in Jack Whitehall's and Hannah Waddingham's. I'm going to go to Nathan for this one. Jack Shep being that Gen Z voice, coming from TikTok, being openly gay, having relationships with Annabel Marlow talking about on stage, kind of just permeating the show in every facet. Love to hear your take on him.
I think you said everything very, very correct. Just that he hits all the marks to what Sky and Comcast, NBC are looking for. He's young, good-looking, talented, part of the queer community. He's an important demographic, and that's why he's in those sketches. Even if it's just the young lad or a couple of lines, he's anchoring them, and he's the Romeo of the cast. And he deserves it because he's very, very talented. And the whole Diana sort of meme that came out of it, and the references back to it, it was such a great swing for him on that first episode. So very deserving.
And I'll follow up in that. Did you see, after episode 1, seeing Fouracres and Jack Shep be so neck and neck in screen time, and even if you didn't know the data, you could easily tell that they were very forward in the show, both in the cold open and appeared throughout. Fouracres, of course, wrapping it up with 45 seconds there. But did any part of you think like this is going to be Jack Shep's show?
No. I guess with George Fouracres, because he does these kind of solo sketches, you think that he's probably got the edge over it, but Jack can just be put anywhere, as opposed to George, which I guess you said, John, more kind of solo experiences there. I just think Jack is the right poster boy for the show.
Agreed. And there's just so much ensemble mixed in with so much leads. Like a stat line like this, John, it kind of just doesn't really get better than this. So when we extend the episode run in series 2, is there any fatigue factor that comes into this?
Not for me. I mean, from the audience perspective, I don't think that there's any.
I mean, from Jack's perspective.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. He's been doing it every episode, so you can't say that there's any indication that he can't keep up with his pace right now. It is an unprecedented pace, but a great one. And when you talk about how you watch Saturday Night Live, some people watch for big moments. I think Jack had a couple, but I think you would probably look at George as more of the big moment guy. And some people watch to see these really great, well-rounded performers. And I think that is Jack Shep to a T. He is somebody who is going to have his own delivery. He's going to have his own voice. Like we said, a very important voice for the show, but he's just going to continue to be all over the show. And I think, having the Princess Diana moment in the premiere and that sort of becoming the face of the show, they then reference it in the following episode's cold open. If you're a writer on the show, you're going to write Jack into your sketch because you know that everyone can recognize Jack from the moment he's in your sketch, and that becomes a more watchable and memeable and important moment for the show. So I think that it was just a perfect snowball of events here. And, I will make another American sports comparison because it's just what Mike and I are the most familiar with. But for me, this is the only way I can resolve the George versus Jack thing in my mind, which is that in baseball, there are multiple ways to get a hit. And, I think that George is your home run hitter, but Jack hits a lot of doubles. Which means that he gets like halfway there to scoring, but he keeps people on base. He keeps the whole team moving. And I just think that is the closest thing in my mind, Mike, where I watch this guy and he's hitting like 3 doubles a night, but George is going to hit a home run.
Seriously, that's a great comp for going to American sports because he definitely hits for average, but has a lot of varied ways to get on base for sure. Do you think that in general, he's a sketch heightener? Is he more of a team player? Because I did mention with Celeste that I think she does make people around her better. Do you think Jack Shep is kind of somebody that could be just as good in a one-person piece as a team of 10, because I think that's the difference maker of SNL stars, is somebody that's like, is he taking over the sketch, or is he just somebody that's consistent? Because the stats are consistent, but he also destroyed everyone in numbers this year.
Right. And that's why I think that what you're alluding to is correct in that he can do this better than a lot of people we've seen on the show lately. I think that Bowen was the comp that a lot of people made to Jack when Jack first came on the show. And to me, he's better at this so far than from what I saw from Bowen, in that if you look at some of his resume here, where you go to the 1930s couple, the 1930s cocaine, that's the one where he is with a group of people and he absolutely elevates that sketch in his voice. Only a couple episodes later, we see him in the Lost Property Office sketch with Amy Lou Wood, where it's really a solo piece. Annabelle jumps in for a moment, but it's really him and Amy Lou Wood. And I think he totally crushes that. So I think any concerns I had about him really siloing himself in, hey, you're the Gen Z guy and you're going to sort of do the thing that, talk Gen Z language, which we did see obviously when they were on Update together. My concerns were not valid. I think so far through 8 episodes, I feel that there is enough diversity of performance that I feel that Jack is totally well-deserved to be as well-rounded as he is and in the number 1 spot. There is, of course, the concern in the future that we have seen performers like this really box themselves in, like a Bowen, like a Jimmy Fallon prior to this. I'm hoping that we don't get that from Jack and he just keeps doing what he's doing because it is working for him.
What's he like behind the camera? What's his writing credits like?
Well, I mean, he was working a lot with Nathan Fode, so I saw him, on that Shy Baby sketch. There was an interesting moment where we get him and Larry Dean in episode 2 writing that Beans Bros sketch. I mean, that was something that felt really different. Obviously, the phone song in episode 3, Dormouse episode, it was part of that too. The 1930s Couple episode 4, Cabin Murder episode 5, Lost Property Office episode 6, Scrimch episode 7, and then the Dance Curse, the final episode of series 1. He's there. So every episode, Nathan, he has a writing credit. And if you just look at the resume, it is absolutely stacked for 8 episodes.
That's good to hear.
I think the Bowen comparison, John, is most apt in the first episode with Shy Baby. That seemed, especially maybe with, a host like Tina being there and having a separate set. We saw Bowen do a lot of second stage sketches where they'd have one group of people doing the main sketch, and then here's Bowen over on a second stage, which was Jack Shep being the fetus in the womb, being the Shy Baby. And even his introduction, which you kind of alluding to, was he was brought into the Starmer Cold Open to be the Gen Z liaison or interpreter, and that might be how they saw him going in. And if that's how they still see him, I think it's a good success route for him to translate to audiences. But he's clearly more than that, clearly more than playing camp and sketches or doing more queer themes, because we saw Bowen love to do that, and we loved seeing him do that, where Jack Shep doing other things that really I didn't see being pigeonholed at all or siloed. It was very easy to him to play a heterosexual character. It was very easy to see him play period or modern. And I think that's the best thing I can say about him, because we don't want to see him just be the poster boy or be the sweetheart, but like be a well-rounded sketch player. And we saw that literally all 8 weeks, Nathan. Final thoughts on our number 1 triple crown winner of SNL UK.
I think it's deserving. I do have my worries, like you said, about poster boy. For me personally, the don't young people talk funny, it's not my particular bag, but I can understand why it's a good source of comedy. And most importantly, what Jack is doing is he is bringing in a young audience, and that is the future. That's the secret to SNL UK's future, and I think Jack is going to bring in an audience.
John, I think the legacy watch here for the first winner of the stats in the first series might be the most important question, because you only get to have a first impression once, and Jack Shep ended up being the winner of the first impression. So where do you go from here?
Well, I just want to be clear that it is very okay to have a brand on this show, whether it is, queer themes and sketches or Gen Z talk. It's okay that we can wrap our minds around what type of sketch we can expect from Jack. But I do think that the best performers to ever do it on Saturday Night Live had other tools in their tool bag. And I think that for him, he showed me, even just in Scrimsh, that a couple episodes ago in Hannah Waddingham, where you watch that and you're like, whoa, this is kind of like Dan Aykroyd-ish. She was a little wild and crazy guy type of thing. And I just think that there was elements to his performances that we've seen where, yes, it's easy for him to write what he likes to perform, but he is so talented and so well-rounded that he's not stuck in that box. So I know that there is the concern that he's going to be the Gen Z guy always, but I just think in our limited sample size from what we've seen from series one, he's shown me enough to feel good that he gets the show. He gets that it's not just about performing in one way, in one style. He needs to be what the show needs from him. And I think because he is willing and he's letting himself just dive in fully to the process of Saturday Night Live, he is being rewarded for that. So some people on the show might have bigger moments episode to episode, but to me, he is one of the stars of this show, if not the star in his own way.
So again, where does he go from here, though? Would you keep doing what you're doing, or is there a lane that we haven't mentioned?
Well, I would keep doing what you're doing right now, Jack, because if you keep this up, no one's ever done it before. No one ever has been as well-rounded as you, save for Phil Hartman, who is my GOAT, by the way, who I think is the greatest person to ever do it on the show. He was as well-rounded as it got for years on the show. He has numbers nobody's ever gotten to. And that's the highest compliment I could ever give you, where if you just keep up this pace, you're in a league with somebody like Phil.
Absolutely. Let's wrap up the Legacy Watch talk for this evening after going through all 11 cast members by getting a way too early prediction for Series 2. Nathan, you're my first time guest on By The Numbers. Have to go to you first and give me, and this is stats, remember, not favorites, who do you predict will be top 3 power rankings next season? And you're more than welcome to say the same as this year, which would have been number 1, Jack Shep, number 2, George Fouracres, number 3, Celeste Dring.
George number 1, Emma number 2, Jack number 3.
That's a great call, John. You agree?
Yeah, I'm very close. I flipped Jack and Emma. I would say that I would go George, Jack, and then Emma. But those 3 feel like the power trio that we have at the top here. I would say Hamed 4 if we're going to give another out of the box prediction.
Yeah,
there.
You're top 5 if you want.
Yeah, I'll say Hamed number 4. I think, there's not enough for me to say that Celeste won't be 5. But I could see Annabel and Celeste sort of fighting for that 5 slot there. Al, very unique. But yeah, we went over all these performers, and I think we got a good lay of the land. There's a long ways to go. And of course, the fun of Saturday Night Live is you never know what's going to happen. This is a live show as it develops, and I love getting to cover it week after week. So for me, the excitement builds as we get closer and closer to September.
And as we get closer to September, there's the legacy questions that we ask ourselves every summer with SNL US, which is who's going, are they going to add? So that's my second and final, Nathan, I promise. I know it's very late where you are. Will they add to the cast for Series 2?
I hope they don't, actually. I think it would be really good to keep this ensemble for 2 seasons and, continue the camaraderie and everybody they've got there, and then this time next year making some changes.
So that's your hope, but do you predict that they will?
I think that they might try and increase the diversity in the cast if I was a betting man.
I think that a show like this, successful first run, they almost can't help themselves by trying to be a shark and always keep swimming forward, and they're going to add at least one person. But I think, John, that they might, I don't know if this is our influence on this podcast, but understand the value of small cast. It would be, I think, insane of a move to add 5, to get from 11 to 16. Like, whoa. Let's not broke what's not, let's not fix what's not broken right now. But I think it's almost in the nature of this type of show to inject fresh blood. What say you, Schneider?
Yeah, if they add 5, you're gonna be like, all right, now we're cooking. Who's getting out of this cast? But for me, I think it'll be one person they'll add to this cast. I think sort of you look at like the Bill Murray-ification of that original cast. I think that they'll find another person to add to the mix. I would not be surprised if they took that person out of the writer's room. I feel like there are a lot of great performers that they have, that they used a lot of the extras and sketches were writers. So you
Bella
look
Hull.
at somebody, you look at Bella Hull as a great example. She's the announcer of the show. She's been in a lot of these sketches. I think she is a pretty great person to then move into the cast if that's someone they want to consider. You looked at other people like Chris Cantrill is in a bunch of sketches. Like there's a lot of people that are there that you can consider. I would rather them take someone in-house that we have a little bit of familiarity with to then move to the cast instead of just going completely out of the box and bringing in new auditioners.
Fair enough. We shall see. And do we have a date yet, John, for September? Or we just know it's in September.
We do not have a date yet, but
Okay.
Stay tuned and we will let you know as soon as we know.
And remind our listeners how many episodes were ordered.
We were told 12. So 12 for now. I think the option for more is on the table, but 12 for now.
All right. Well, I can't wait. Nathan, you've been an incredible guest. I love hearing your perspective, and I just can't say enough how much I appreciate you staying up late for us. And if you are a listener in the UK, then we really appreciate you checking us out. This is a very unorthodox approach to comedy because we're not rating comedy. We're commenting on it, but under the umbrella of numbers and stats. So, Nathan, I hope you had a good time.
Had a lovely time, and I'd love to return.
Absolutely. Love to have you back. Series 2 is just around the corner, John, and so is season 52 of SNL. So what do we have cooking for the summer series?
Well, a lot happening right now. I'll just say if you missed any of our UK coverage from Series 1, you can go back. We did after shows after each episode of SNL UK. So if you want to watch an episode and then go check out what we had to say about it afterwards, you can. And Nathan was one of the incredible British correspondents that joined us throughout Series 1. So we are almost done our coverage of SNL Season 51 and SNL UK Series 1. We have one more show for you this week, which is our feedback show, where we get our paid subscribers, our patrons, the biggest supporters of the SNN. They come and join us on the show on Wednesday night. So I'll be live for about 3 hours talking to all of our patrons. They're going to come on with me, ask some questions, get to know some of the people in our community. They're so amazing with all of their thoughts. So I'm excited to answer their questions and talk to them about whatever they want to get into. So that'll be Wednesday night. We'll be live from about 7 to 10 Eastern this Wednesday. And then we're going to kick off our summer series. So we are going to be counting down the 100 greatest SNL sketches of all time. SNL US sketches, not SNL UK. Maybe one day we'll do that for UK, but just US this summer. So the voting is available now. We have released the form to anyone who has signed up on Patreon. You can go and fill out the form there. If you are joining us on Patreon, your vote will be valued slightly higher than if you do so on social media. So that's one of the rewards for joining us on Patreon. So I would really appreciate everybody filling out the form. My rule for this always has been you have no right to complain about the list if you did not vote on the list. So please do so. So vote for your favorite sketches, even if it's 10 sketches you submit. That's okay. We will have them contributed to the ultimate list that we will calculate throughout the week. This week, we also have it out on social media if you prefer to vote there. We still will count your votes, obviously, coming in on socials. So get those votes in for your favorite sketches of all time. Sunday night, I will be live with Bill to kick off this entire thing. So we will be there to go through the first 10 sketches on the list. That will be Sunday night. I'll be doing some traveling next week. I'm excited to tell you guys about that when I'm back, but I'm going to be doing some traveling. So we won't be live next Monday night in this spot. It'll be Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, where Bill and I will kick off the countdown. And then we will be live each and every Monday night throughout the entire summer for from mid-June to mid-September to go through the countdown. And of course, maybe some interviews, maybe some other fun breaking news moments throughout the summer. So stay tuned to the SNN to never miss anything here. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify to subscribe. And you can follow us on all social platforms at the SNL Network to never miss anything we have going on here at the Saturday Night Network.
So much to look forward to. I think that the SNL burnout comes in, but only like a week goes by, John, and I want more. So it doesn't really last long. So I guess this is my farewell for season 51 and series 1 of SNL UK. So I want to thank LateNighter.com for presenting with us. You can always check out my write-ups on Screen Time week to week for SNL US. I also did one for the SNL UK premiere and a wrap-up article that came out this morning for the total screen times there to get some more insight. Thank you for joining us as always. We will see you next time. For Nathan, John Schneider, I am Mike Murray. Check us out in 52 and all summer long. We'll see you next time, everybody.